Hello, ladies. How are you? Nice to see everyone. Does the sound work out well? You guys can hear me good. I'm in a different place. Am I in Jerusalem after celebrating Yom Yerushalayim? So we went to the parade. Everything is good. So I'm on a different internet. I'm on a different headset computer. So I just want to make sure everything worked out. Nice to see everyone. I'm glad you guys were all at the parade. No, I'm just kidding. No, it was really nice. There's a lot of people there, which was really beautiful. And I hope you guys are all had the ability to celebrate in some way in terms of that. Okay, we're looking forward to a good evening. We had spoken about last time, we had spoken about, the first night, the wedding night, talking about sexuality. We had Shai Krug talking about male sexuality, a very intensive, very informative lecture. Were there any comments and thoughts that someone wanted to share about the lecture from Shai Krug? Is there anything that came up for someone, something that he said, something of the sort? Yeah, go for it.
I wasn't entirely sure what the practical application was, but then I thought maybe it was just an educational session.
Okay. It really is a big question of what of that information are you going to pass on? Right? You're like education for me or education that I'm supposed to educate? It's a
Right.
really
It
big
felt like
question.
education for me.
You're
I
saying
don't know
it's
if other
not.
people felt that way.
You're saying it wasn't education, like you knew everything. Is that what you're saying?
No, it was education for me, but not necessarily to pass on.
Right? It was very detailed, right? It
Yeah.
was very, very detailed. I was thinking about it as he was saying over exactly what happens in the man's body for arousal. And I was thinking about in my mind the way that I teach it. And I found it really interesting because I give over a seventh grade biology class, like mamash basic, blood rushes in, it doesn't come back out, causes the erection, like mamish basic ideas of what an erection is. And I was thinking about the way that he was teaching it. And I was wondering, again, that's why I think all of you are here to think about that. How detailed do you want to give it? Right? About all the different layers and what happens to the corpus cavernosum and the layer above the layer. And like, you know what? Sometimes it's just too much. It's like not in the space, but it's for us to know and for us to understand biologically what's going on. And sometimes we want to pass that on. What were your thoughts? Who wants to share? Matana.
I think that some of the things he said were actually very interesting, and I think that we should teach them to Kallah. He said he was talking about how, like, even if a man has an erection, there's still certain things that, like, it doesn't mean he's always going to be pleased. There's certain aspects, there's the mind and body aspect of it also. And I think a lot of women are like, oh yeah, okay, we had sex and like this happened and he's fine now. He's happy, he's satisfied. But I remember he was saying, like, no, just because it ended doesn't mean he was like satisfied. So he was talking a lot about that. And I think that Kallah should know that so that they both themselves and their husbands can have enjoyable experiences.
Yeah, and I think that just to like, sharpen that message is that because a lot of times at the beginning of the marriage, that's the thought. Because we're so focused on the very beginning, like, did they have penetration? Did they not have penetration? Like all that conversation. So that's really what sex is considered. And I think that his lecture broadened that idea that it doesn't only have to be one necessary, like one act. And I think a lot of people at the beginning of their journey need to expand that idea. So I like that. Yeah. Thank you for sharpening that, Matana. Um, other ideas that came up for you that you want to share, that you want to think about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that it broke a lot of stereotypes that girls might not understand, including if men have erectile dysfunction and maybe it's not about them. And I think that is a very important lesson, perhaps.
Yeah, that also for sure, for sure, for sure, for sure. Breaking those stereotypes. So you can write it as like top three stereotypes that I want to break. You can write it as top three pieces of information. I always have a shtick, but it's just a shtick of mine. I don't like when people talk about things that are wrong in society, but rather things that are right. Like to me, lectures about the 10 mistakes that people make in Nida, they like it bothers me so much. So I'm like, why are we focusing on mistakes? Let's focus on positive. The 10 amazing things that people do in their lives. So I think in this way also you don't want to say, I mean, again, you guys get to decide what you want to teach, but not like the three myths or whatever, but like saying like, three things that are really important to know about sexuality for men. And I think that you could break it up in that way. Beautiful. And to share that because we're breaking stereotypes. And a lot of times girls are coming in with the stereotypes that are based on their friends, their stereotypes that they've heard, and also based on movie and TV and Insta and all that, social media. Thank you. Other ideas? Okay. All the lectures are up. You're definitely welcome to like review the lectures, go through them again. Sometimes it's a lot of information coming at once, and to think about how you want to present it. That's the goal. We want to like process and be like, what am I going to take over from this lecture? Is it just for me and my knowledge? And not going to bring it in at all in any which way. And I should know that there are different difficulties that come up. Or is it like I need to give over in a positive way, a way of breaking the stereotypes, a way of talking about positive sexuality and like in different forms for the man, etc. Whoops, what did I just do? Can you hear me? I just pressed a button by accident. It was really by accident. Okay. I'm loving the earphones though. I got to tell you, I'm shouting less and I hear you guys like really clearly. So even though I look like I'm a secretary on a phone, I'm just loving it. I think I might continue to do it always. Um, okay. So that's the idea regarding his lecture. I wanted to do a little bit of halacha catch up, if that's okay with you guys. We have about 2 hours now from like now until 9 o'clock. Our lecture is coming at 9 o'clock to talk about Sephardic halacha. And I think it's important now to talk about the harchakot first, because there are going to be differences between Ashkenazic and Sephardic halacha regarding the harchakot, the behavior during nida. And then if we can get to it also, we'll see how far we can get. We can talk about mikveh preparation and things of the sort. So on this computer, I try to set up everything. What was I going to say about this computer is that my Word documents aren't working, but my Dropbox is. So I can
I have a
share.
question.
Yeah, go for it.
Are
I'm
we
listening.
gonna learn about how to teach like the sex class to a non-virgin, like what you choose to do?
Yes, we're going to have a conversation about that. Yeah, we could totally do that. I think we could sharpen that and even do that now. Can we discuss that? Well, let's take 1 minute to discuss it now. You just brought it up. Let's take 1 minute to discuss that. That's important. Matana, what did you want to say?
I was also gonna ask if we can talk about a Kallah who's actually pregnant on her wedding day.
My gosh. Okay. That's also
Gotcha.
an important one. Yeah, there's a lot of these that come up for sure, for sure, for sure. So, Kallah pregnant on her wedding day is also, that definitely comes up. She has to go to the mikveh before her wedding, that's for sure. A Kallah before, even though she's pregnant and there's no reason and she's not, bleeding and she's not, technically what's it called? Like seeing her period. However, because she never went to the mikveh before, she's still considered a nida, a nida. And therefore she does have to count Shiva Nikiyam and go to the mikveh, even though she's pregnant. So I think that that's an important point because some people might not think about that. What else comes up? It's just, it depends what you want to talk about with sexuality. I think now this is a personal decision, and I think everyone gets to make their own decisions about what to teach regarding sexuality for someone who's been sexually active. The reason why people are coming to us is because they're learning the laws of nida, right? Let's be real. Let's stay focused always. People are coming to Kallah teachers because they want to learn the laws of nida. That is what they're signing up for. They want to know about the mikvah. They want to know about the checks. They want to know about the behavior, like this concept of nida. And we're going to talk about if you have one session, two sessions, three, etc. So we're going to expand it for different ones. What I do want to point out is that a woman who's sexually active, she might not necessarily want to learn about sex. And while some people might disagree about this, I think, and I really do believe, it's up to the Kallah to choose what she wants to learn. I'm not going to talk about sexuality if she doesn't want to go there. Right? That's not my right. That's her private space. And I'm not going to be like, oh, let me tell you all about sex, even though you're already sexually active. You've been sexually active for the past 5 years, etc. On the other hand, I always offer it to her. And I always give her that opportunity to make that decision and say, listen, I teach about sexuality. I'm happy to go through sexuality with you. I know that you're sexually active. Would you like a lesson on that? And with sexuality, I teach either part A, talking about what I spoke with you, what is foreplay, what is penetration, talking about different positions. For some people, they don't want that. Some people are like, sure, I'd love to hear what you tell. I'd love to hear you go through that process. And for some people, I'm just going to take the lectures that you've heard from like Jody and Shai Krug in terms of that. And I'll go through Masters and Johnson, and I'll go through Rosemary Bassan, and I'll go through Emily Nagoski, and I'll talk about different theories regarding sexual pleasure and what it's like female arousal, male arousal, what does that mean, etc. So that is also what I do. So again, I have my 2-part lecture, right, talking about taking you through the sexual experience, and I could do that for people who are already sexually active. It's not a difference, and they sometimes learn about it. And the second part is talking about what goes on in their bodies. I find whether people are sexually active or not, the people that are more sexually experienced, it gives them an opportunity to ask questions. This all depends where you are personally in giving over this information. I'm saying it because like I'm a sex counselor, so I like do this all the time and I'm comfortable talking about this. And like you can be comfortable also, and that's amazing and that's wonderful. And we should all get you to that place, but you don't have to. So, like, for example, if a girl is talking about difficulties getting to orgasm, she's going to open it up at that point. When I talk about what the sexual drive is and how that works, she might ask questions regarding that. And like a lot of is it normal kind of conversation, right? I squirt, is that normal? Right. And then they'll talk about that, right? And they'll figure out like, am I normal? Is this weird? And etc. Again, you have to feel comfortable with this, but like I'm totally open to answering those questions. They usually do come up with women who are sexually active. You might be one of the, more experienced sex educators that are out there that she's been speaking to, right? A lot of times women take their information from social media and TV, maybe some books, maybe not. And it's for you to be able to direct her to proper information. So I think that that's an excellent opportunity. You guys are all sex educators, right? After this course, you will be a sex educator, and therefore you'll be able to educate regarding sexuality and send her to the resources that she needs. So it's about feeling comfortable, but it's also about giving her directions. And if you don't know something, you can always say, you know what, I'm not sure about that. Let me get back to you. And that's fine. So that's my thought regarding that. Sounds good. Questions, thoughts? Okay. So getting back to transitions, let's talk about non-sexual behavior. Now, you guys had a lecture from Rabbanit Nechama Barish, right, who spoke about teaching Nida Deoraita. And in it, she spoke a lot about teaching Chiloni brides and how to deal with teaching non-religious brides. And she spoke about how she presents the behavior during Nida. And I take this from her because I think it's a great way of talking about it. And I do it also for people who are religious. But when I talk about the behavior during Nida, I'm going to talk about sexual spaces and non-sexual spaces. I will never call it the harchakot, the behavior during Nida. I call it, because harchakot means distancing, I call it behaviors, hitnahagut bisman Nida. And that's why your booklet actually says that. It says hitnahagut bisman Nida. It does not say harchakot, the distancing between a husband and a wife. And I use this opportunity. I'm just saying, I use the opportunity. You could choose what you want to meet the Chatan and the Kallah together. I find it's a neutral topic. Like it's neutral. You're not talking straight out about sex. You're talking about what you can't do. And therefore, I find it for some people, it's a nice, comfortable topic to bring in the Chatan. Sometimes he's learned this before. That doesn't bother me. We can always learn things twice, 3 times, whatever. But I find it lovely because a lot of times I raise issues that they get to speak about together afterwards, right? I'm like, I'm going to be raising some issues. You're going to like want to go for a cup of coffee afterwards and have a conversation about these issues. Maybe you've talked about them, maybe not. But the behavior during Nida is a joint decision about how it's going to look in your household. And therefore, everyone's going to make different decisions about how it's going to look. I am sure that all of us have different ways that how the behavior during Nida looks, right? Everyone has different ways. How do we make those symbols, those signs, right? How do we keep it? And therefore, I want them to be able to think about how it's going to look in their households. So with that being said, I call both of them together, arrange a meeting together, and then I offer them to go through the sources or not. I'm going to give you an opportunity and we're going to look at the sources. So I'm going to open up the sources, share screen. Just getting a little comfortable here. The only thing I don't have is a mouse, but I think we can organize this based on that. So let's go through share screen. Here we go. I was open before. Okay, over here. Why isn't it here? Table of contents and behavior during Nida, page 51. Ooh, this is a nice big screen. I'm really liking this new computer. Thanks for joining me on it. Okay, here we go. And we are on of the booklet. What does it say here? I think I could close this to make it bigger, right? Oh no, it's going to close the whole thing. Ooh, I hope I didn't do that. Okay, we are on page, what is this page? I don't know what page are we on. 52. 52 of 162. Page 52, and we shall begin. I hope this is the right booklet that you have, that it's updated 2023. Let's see if it works. There's one pasuk and one pasuk only that talks about the behavior during nida. There are actually two pasukim. Pasuk chaf also repeats it, but it says ve'elisha b'nidat tumata lo tikrav legalot ervata. Right, a woman who is in her nida, tuma of nida, do not come close to revealing nakedness. And one of the things that you could see here from the pasuk is that there's an isur deoraita to come close to revealing nakedness. In fact, the isur deoraita is to reveal nakedness. Now, revealing nakedness is a code word for having penetrative sex. So therefore, the isur deoraita here is penetrative sex. There is a machloket regarding lo tikrav. Do not come close. What does that mean? Do not come close, right? I'm near, I'm far. What is it like? I'm almost touching your shoulder. I'm not. No. So basically, there's a machloket, a disagreement between the Rambam and the Ramban. According to the Rambam, here you can see in the mitzvah Shin Gimel, I like to call it the Shomer Nigia mitzvah, is that it says she's harder mikiruv lachat mikol elu arayot. At least one person got the joke. Okay, fine. A little bit. It's Shindon Gimel. That's why it's Shindon. It stands for Shomer Nigia. My husband always says if you have to explain your joke, it's not funny. She's harder mikiruv lachat mikol elu arayot. He forbids us from coming close to any of the forbidden relationships, afilu below bi'ah, even without penetrative sex. Kegon chibuk v'neshikava demele mipilu znut. The Rambam is counting this as one of the 613. And therefore, the Rambam holds that this is an isur deoraita to touch in a loving and affectionate manner. So based on this, we have an isur deoraita. He learns it from a midrash halacha, where you take a line and you learn out a law from each and every word in the pasuk. So that is the idea in source number 2. The Rambam holds that touching in a loving and affectionate manner is asur mideoraita. Sorry, one second. Okay, then we could see the Ramban. The Ramban holds, Hine Rav Matzah Braita Zo Mefureshet. The Rav, meaning the Rambam, finds this great Braita that explains, V'talad devarav bilan gadol. And he hung his words on a great big tree, which is so interesting. It's basically saying, like, he's taking Midrash Halacha and he's learning out laws in this Midrash Halacha. However, Midrash Halacha is not Deoraita, it's rather Dirabanan, and therefore, according to the Ramban, this is an Isur Dirabanan. So it is a machloket if hugging and kissing and touching, sexual touch, is Deoraita Dirabanan. The Rambam holds it's Deoraita. The Ramban holds it's Dirabanan. In any which way, in either case, it doesn't matter. It's going to be Asur. And therefore, based on this, they're not allowed to touch, right? You're not allowed to have sex and intimate behavior. One of the things I like to point out from this is that it makes a lot of sense, right? And this is our whole philosophy regarding sex, is that sex is not just one thing. It's not just penetration. And therefore, two people rolling around in bed together, fully clothed, but both orgasming at the same time, while it might not be considered sex according to the books, to me, that's considered sex. Right? There's no penetration going on there, but that is definitely sexual behavior. No, you cannot get pregnant based on that. However, that is sexual behavior, and therefore, I think that should be asur d'oraita just as much. I understand that it's a different level because it's punishable by karet intercourse, and hugging and kissing and like sexual contact is only but punishable by lashes. So therefore, it is a different level. Whether or not, I think that those are two things that are asur, possibly deoraita, but there is a different level to that. It's interesting when the Shulchan Aruch writes it in Seif Bet, and then we'll go back to Seif Aleph. It says, Lo yigaba afilu be'etzba ktana. He is not even allowed to touch her little pinky, right? So it's not talking about deoraita, not deorabanan. It literally just says, don't touch her pinky. And I think the reason why is because we need lines, right? And instead of saying, is this a sexual high five, a not sexual high five, it is much easier to say, no, we are not touching at all. And therefore, based on that, that is the line. And therefore, if you, young newlywed couple, wants to draw a different line, your line has to be very clear, right? The halacha here is giving you a line. However, right, if you are not drawing the line of halakha, what's stated here, you better be very clear about what your line is, because otherwise we get confused about lines and we violate our lines. And therefore, just like with sexual behavior, you're going to talk about your lines. Like, I do want to do this. I don't want to do this, right? I want to engage in oral sex. I don't want to engage in oral sex. This is my line. So too in sexual behavior, a non-sexual behavior, you want to define your lines, right? It is very clear, right? We're going to be a halachic following couple. We're not going to do anything. We are going to just touch. We are not going to do, more intimate touch, whatever the case may be. And if someone wants to change the rules of the game, it is only allowed to do so when you're not in the middle of the act, right? You got a lifetime together. And if someone feels that they want to change the rules of the game, you're going to take a deep breath. You're going to stop what you're doing. And then the next morning, you're going to have a cup of coffee and discuss your lines. So I think that also we have to be very clear about the lines. With that, yeah, Matana.
So if you have very clear lines, like, or you're very, very strict, I always hear this situation of like when you're in labor, you go into Nida and then like you're screaming and crying and your husband can't even like hold your hand or be there for you. So how do you kind of differentiate those lines and make them clear? Because it's not like you could be as strict and go by halakha and be as strict as possible, but say, okay, I know he's not going to jump my bones while I'm pushing something out. So like, how do we?
Okay, so I feel differently about going into labor. I have a two-part share on labor and delivery, and there are different post-game who believe differently regarding labor. Labor is a chola sheyesh ba sakana, right? I don't know if all of you have given birth, not giving birth. What's your stories? What's your fertility journey or not? But when we talk about labor, right? Labor is a chola sheyesh ba sakana. We all agree to that it's a sick person in a dangerous situation because it happens always. Sometimes if we want to violate Shabbat for it, we have to do it with the shinoi, right? So there's a little bit different level of halakha, but it's definitely a chola sheish basakana. And in any case of a chola sheish basakana, if the woman needs something, the husband is going to be able to help her out. Now, it's also different because in the Gemara itself, the Gemara says that for a woman who's about to give birth, we light a candle for her, right? Sorry, let me say that clearly. A blind woman who's about to give birth, we light a candle for her. And there the Gemara goes on to talk and says that's because she feels calmer knowing that other people can see her. It's not because she needs the light. And we're talking about on Shabbat. I don't know if I gave the background, right? That you're allowed to light a candle for her on Shabbat. It's not that she needs the light to see, she's blind, but she feels more comfortable knowing that other women can see her. And therefore, the Gemara says for her sense of peace of mind, we are violating an Isur Deoraita of Shabbat. I'm putting it out there. So based on that, are you allowed to violate an Isur Derabanan, possibly not even Derabanan, of touching in labor if the woman needs it? So that's why there are differences of opinion, mamash across the board, and you have to follow your posek. However, there are some who say, no, you're not allowed to touch, not at all. Some who say in the early stages of labor, and some will even say that if you are in labor and the wife needs the husband's hand because squeezing the husband's hand is much better than squeezing the doula's hand, so then you're allowed to do that, but only for labor, not afterwards. So there is a way, and that's why I think like there are lines there, and you have to have that discussion. What does that mean for you? So it's an interesting discussion regarding that. So I think that halacha actually does make sense in a lot of cases. Sometimes it's hard. Miscarriage is terrible because after miscarriage, you can't touch, and that's terrible, right? Once you give birth, you have a baby, you're holding a baby, amazing, wonderful. But if a woman miscarries and she's not holding a baby, like this is terrible. And I don't have any good answers, and that's where I find it very, very, very challenging. Ella.
I just wanted to share from my personal experience that right before I gave birth, I called my Kallah teacher and I said, we need to have revision. And we went over firstly what we could do in labor. And then also after I needed like a revision of harchakot because I forgot for 9 months, whatever. So that's like what I'm suggesting now to anyone that still hasn't had kids yet to definitely do that. And I think that that's like an important part of our role. Like that for me was very calming, that I knew exactly like what to expect after and what we could do. And we discussed it as like a plan, what we wanted during, and it was just very, very helpful.
Beautiful. So that opens up the conversation. Yeah, great. And the course, we actually recorded a course, the 2-part course through the Edit Center. So like you can have access to it. I think it costs money though, but we recorded that. And I think it's important like to open it up and open up those conversations. I don't want to get so much in labor here because it's really a detailed thing and I want to focus on Kallah. I was just bringing that up because I think that there are different scenarios. Kallah.
Do you teach harchakot to people that are sexually active?
Yes, I do. It's what it like depends on the spectrum on where they're going to be. Meaning I always teach it because they're coming to me about nida, and
Okay.
therefore I teach it as, okay, you're not allowed to have sex. And then the Torah also talks about this, like, disagreement regarding sexual play. And then I say, what are going to be your lines? Meaning some people are sexually active. Once they get married, they're going to keep the harchakot. It doesn't matter that they're sexually active. I've had a few people, like, I'm not joking. We're talking about like very from people who were sexually active before they got married. You would never know in a million years, right? And they wanted to keep the harchakot and the laws as is. They just couldn't not be sexually active before they got married. And so we laid it out and we talked about it, and they're following the harchakot. It's amazing. So like that's one option. And there's some people who are sexually active who are like, okay, we're just not going to have sex at the time of nida. And I'm like, okay, but let me talk about what you're going to set up in your household to make it a non-sexual space. If you want to make sure not to have sex, what are you going to do to allow that piece to happen? So I phrase it like that, and that's what Nechama spoke about also. Okay. Yes, Esther.
Just quickly, you threw out the word karet. Okay. If someone has had relations when they were in need and they call you and they think they're cut off from Klal Yisrael forever, what happens now?
I think that we always have the ability to do tshuva,
Okay.
right? We always have the ability to do tshuva. There are plenty of people in this world who have had sex before marriage, sex while they were in nida, and we always have the ability to start afresh and anew, right? I always say nagia or touching or even nida. It's not like fasting. When you fast and you break your fast is over. You are done. However, when you are going through this process of nida, there are times that you might be better at this, times that you might be worse. There are ups and downs. I always talk about with the shomer nagia before a couple gets married, right? We know don't ever tell them the statistics, but like 90% of people are not shomer nagia when they're engaged, unless they're not seeing each other. Like in the communities where they really don't see each other and don't, interact in that way, then it's really strict and they do that and they're helpful. And like if you follow the laws of Yichud, you really could do it. You really can, right? Because then it's never going to happen. But the people who are not following the laws of Yichud and are not careful about this, 90% of people are not Shomer Negiah. So I say to them, listen, it's, there are ups and downs in your engagement. There are times that you're better at being Shomer Negiah, times that you're worse. But just because one night by accident you broke it and that's not where you want to be, does not mean that tomorrow you can't start again, right? We have the ability to do tshuva. We have the ability to set things right. So therefore go for it. And I also talk about, I'll bring it in right now. This is where I talk about it. I read the first Shulchan Aruch. This is what I talk about. I just gave away what I was going to speak about, but it's all good. Where it talks about the first part. A person has to separate from their wife during the times of nida until they count and go to the mikvah. Both of those things are happening. They're not allowed to joke around and be lighthearted together. Shema yargil avera, because we're nervous, it's going to lead to sin. So what does this mean? This means flirting. I think actually it's really good to flirt during nida. It's an excellent flirtatious time. That doesn't mean that you're going to talk, there's some couples that talk like this close to each other that you can put a piece of paper in between them, right? That's not going to happen during the times of nida because then for sure someone's going to break, especially if you're alone together. But a little bit of flirtatiousness is good. And I think, they say that the foreplay for the mikveh night begins on the day that the woman gets her period. If there is interaction, if there is excitement, if there is, a little bit of flirtatiousness, so then that's going to lead to really like a connection that goes on the mikveh night. But if two people literally close themselves off, go into different spaces, don't interact on the mikveh night, it's going to be like, what's your name? Who are you? Right. So I think that that's, should be a part of it. I always say I want to be the 90-year-old couple that's flirting. I want to be flirting on May Stream. So if that's the case, we got to practice our flirtation skills. And therefore, just like when we were not newlyweds, we were engaged and we were in Beit Shemesh and we were in a supermarket buying shampoo. And a woman in the aisle was like, "Are you guys engaged?" I'm like, "How do you know?" She's like, I could tell. I want to be that couple. I want to be buying shampoo like that all the time. That little giggles going on. So we're going to do that on May of Stream. Everyone should flirt. I just want to bring in the one more point and then I'll take it. It says, "Aval mutar lizached." They're allowed to be alone together. Because they had sex even one time, he's able to control his yetzer. So I want to say one thing, that once a couple has sex even one time, so then they're allowed to be alone together. This is talking about a chupat nida, that if the woman is in nida before they get married and they don't have the opportunity to have sex, that would mean that, right? That would mean that they're not allowed to be alone together. And that night he has to sleep, right? They have to have a little kid sleep in the room with them, or they sleep in the parents' house, something of the sort. The theory here is called pat bisalo. The Gemara talks about it. The bread is in your basket. What does that mean? If we always walk around with food, we are never hungry, right? Ladies, raise your hand if you always have a granola bar in your bag. Wow, only 4 of us? Okay, the rest of you must work from home. But if you always have a granola bar in your bag, you are the Papa Solo case, because that means that you always have food in your bag, because if you always have food in your bag, you are never hungry. Those who work from home don't have to bring around, a granola bar because they have food at home. But that's the theory. If you always have something there, then you're never hungry, which is basically the theory if you've been having sex on a natural basis, right? Every 12 days, like the nida process goes on. So then you're able to control your yetzer. And that's why if in the past you have not been shomer negiah during engagement, even though you really wanted to, papa salo. This does get easier. When there is a routine, it is okay. You can do this. Even though you might not have followed it, you have the ability to do this because routine is much easier. You know it's only going to be 12 days, labor 6 weeks. We won't talk about that, but it's only going to be 12 days and you can hold out. On the other hand, if you have not done this before you got married and now all of a sudden you're going to stop everything, sometimes that's really hard. And, it's going to be challenging, right? Because beforehand, when you weren't shomer negiah, you were doing whatever you wanted, whenever you want. And now all of a sudden there are rules. It's really hard. You can do it, but it's going to be challenging, but you really can. And therefore, to realize that it could be challenging, it could be good. Everyone takes this in a different place. It might also be challenging at sometimes and less challenging at other times. So that's the concept of Papa Salo. One more idea based on this is that you could see here that the harchakot, the behavior in nida, is written to the man, right? He has to be able to control his yetzer. And that was because they believe that men have hirurim, sexual thoughts. Women do not have the hirurim. And therefore, according to them, we know that they do. It's just aroused in different ways. And therefore, the behavior is written that he's not allowed to. He can't do this. We are women. We can totally write these halachot also for us. It's up to you if you wanted to make them equal. But clearly, he cannot touch her. So that's obvious that they cannot touch. Not that she could be like, "Ooh, I'm touching you." Like that doesn't work, right? But there are a lot of times written in the male form. Okay, so I said 3 topics based on this. We were talking about the flirting, we were talking about the being alone, and the shomer negiah piece beforehand, definitely bringing that up, and the idea that they're in towards him to talk about his yetzer and things of the sort. Now I can take questions. Rachel, I don't know who raised their hands first, but go for it.
Is part of the reason why it's written towards men related to shechat zara?
It could be.
Because for women, there is no isur of that.
Yeah, it could be. I think that it's more of the hirurim because that's what the Gemara is
Oh.
always nervous about. His sexual thoughts. Sexual thoughts that
Because they
will
could lead to shechat zara.
Yeah, that's what I would think.
Oh, so
Arousing.
it is related, probably.
Yeah, even though in our societies we know that men do not just think sexual thoughts and ejaculate. There is an element of control, and I think that that's important to point out based on what Shai said last week. Okay, matana.
There's this couple in my community who like actively talk about a lot of things they probably shouldn't talk about so publicly, but they talk about how they break nida very often. I'm like, and one time I was stupid. I was like, what do you mean you break nida? Like, okay, you hold each other's hands accidentally or like whatever. And they're like, no, we have sex during nida. And they're like a frum couple. What what would you even say to that? Or like, how would you approach that situation if you were like a Kallah teacher? And every time I hear it and they talk about it very openly, I'm like in shock. And my husband's like, we can't be around them anymore. It's just like too awkward.
It's a lot of TMI. I would really wonder about their personal life and why they're sharing that with everyone. That's like TMI, mamash. Like we don't need to know that. You know what I'm saying? I don't know why they're saying that. I mean, this is the therapist kind of side of me. Like, why are they sharing that? What do they want to say about each other? Like, but that's just my thoughts. I should really put on the other hat here. As the Kallah teacher, I, I don't know if it's a call for help or not. I would be like, you guys share this fact often. Is there something that I don't know? I don't know what I would say. I
Like,
just feel weird about it.
especially
I
if
would
you're
say,
a couple that wants to, like, if you're teaching a Kallah that wants to, and she's like, oh, I accidentally broke it once or twice, or like, I know that we will, but how do you like approach the situation of saying like, okay, this is what you should really do? I know boundaries and whatnot, but
so that's what I think. I think it's much easier for me to answer the other one. Meaning, if they're oversharing, I don't really want to know that, and I maybe would make a comment like, I don't really need to know that. But um, if they are telling you because they want advice, so then I would share with them and I would say, what are the boundaries that you put in place? Meaning boundaries. If this is not something that you want to do, you need boundaries. And that's what happens. Like if a woman calls me up and she's like, oh my God, we just had sex during Nida. And I'm like, okay, I'm not here to absolve sins. I'm not like a priest that's going to absolve. This is on you. You guys are going to have to deal with this. But I would say for the future, you have to think about your boundaries. How do you create healthy boundaries that work for you to make sure that both of you are solid in this and keeping these boundaries to make sure that this doesn't happen again? And that's really it. Like people have boundaries. That's why I said people who keep the laws of Yichud, they're not breaking Shomer Negiah, right? You're not like making out, as I always say, I always joke around with the girls in Midrash Rova. I'm like, you're not making out in the middle of the square, right? The square in the old city. Like you're not doing that. So like if you're only hanging out in the square, like there's no way you're breaking Shomer. So like if you have boundaries, right, it's gonna work. And it's when people want to get to a private space and things like that that they don't have it. That's what I would do in that case. Who else was speaking? Yael.
You mentioned something about how, like, because it's like a regulated, like once like you have sex for the first time, then it becomes regulated, so it's not, like we're not nervous about them being together. But what if it's not regulated in the sense that, like, sometimes it's not like your cycle's not normal, or for whatever reasons, like it's not happening as often. So does anything change halachically? Because it could happen for like a while that like you haven't been together.
Yeah, I deal with those cases. It's terrible. The people who put in the IUDs, right? IUDs are great. They're awesome. Definitely go for IUDs. But there are some people that find it really very challenging in the beginning. And I deal with the couples because I get those questions as they go on set. So like Mamash, I've been dealing with someone now who's been staying for like what was it? She told me since April 2nd. What's today? Today is June 5th. They've not been together because of the IUD. Now, she has to go by every kula in the book and she didn't ask early enough, whatever. But like they haven't been together because of the IUD. So like, yeah, this is hard. All I can say is this is hard, and I identify with them. This is hard. This is challenging. I'm like, let's focus on getting you out of Nita.
But
I'm
nothing
not.
changes halachically, like it's.
No, it doesn't. It's just we have to use every kula in the book to get her out of Nita. Right. And that's why I even said, like, I think it's important for people who are kalot that want to go on IUDs because they're going to university for 3 years. Please try to get it in before you get married. Because this like initial, even if it's 2, 3 months, right? It's normally like 6 months. It takes a while, and then they're Nita for a while, and it's terrible at the beginning of your marriage. But then I don't have a good answer, right? Not all the answers are going to work for everyone, right? They're not going to work in all cases. Okay, who else had a question? Sarah.
I like the point you said about the like flirting during meetup, like Dafka during meetup, but I will say that for myself personally, like my college teacher taught me the exact opposite. That like, meaning which logically made sense to me, like the way she explained it, but like I guess I don't know if this is more of a like meaning how do you justify the flirting while also like saying, meaning when she explained like don't use like your cutie terminology or whatever phrase she used back then, like I was like, oh, that makes sense because it could like XYZ, especially when you're engaged and like if you like you hear those things and it makes you like if you were to be like that makes you want to like touch them even more. So like I don't know, like is that, that's really advice, like we can, meaning not advice, but like something we can say,
I
like,
think we're debating over definitions, right? We're talking about the
correct.
definitions of
But
flirting.
like, but then again, every Kallah can take that definition to mean something for themselves.
And they will, and they have to find that happy medium. It can't be that you shut yourself off, but you can't be intensely flirting. So you have to find yourself on that spectrum, what feels comfortable for you. And to build up, a little bit of build up is good. Sexual tension is okay. People are not gonna like break on the first, hopefully not. You know what I'm saying? Like you have everything else in place. I'm not saying that you should talk, we're like looking into each other like mamash,
Yeah.
standing next to each other, feeling each other's body heat. I'm saying you need to be interacting in your cutesy way, just like during engagement. You know, if you didn't break during engagement and you were strong about this, you could also be strong about this, but like that flirty interaction is good. It's healthy, right? It's important sometimes that we don't always get what we want right away. Like there's a buildup. That's what desire is about. And I think it's important. Like I really do. But again, you have to like that's why I think boundaries and try to feel like what you feel comfortable with. Too much, but like, not enough, not good. Again, you could also teach what your college teacher said. That's also fine. I'm giving you a different interpretation.
No, I liked
Rivka,
it. That's what I started with. I do like it. I was
it's
just
all
like
good.
curious about the
There's a lot
boundaries.
of different opinions. You know what I'm saying? Like that's all good. Rivka.
Yeah.
Sarah's comment, my college teacher taught me that until you're at the mikvah and the door is locked, you can't flirt because like in a way that's like a good thing because you're in such a good relationship that like flirting could cause more. I don't know. But like yeah, I hear it both ways. But also I want to say that this is my problem with the not talking 7 days before the wedding. And I try to like tell as many people this as I can, but people are like, you're crazy. Like it's a big deal to not talk before your wedding. But then like you get to your wedding and you're like, wait, we didn't talk for a week. What do we do?
I totally am with you. This new not talking before your wedding is a new thing. It is new, right? It is not what happened. Like there was, even the not seeing each other before the wedding is an Ashkenazic practice. It is not practiced amongst the Sephardim. You can ask Aurora Sutton afterwards, like she's going to talk about Sephardic Kallah. It was not like that regarding the Sephardim. We're talking about back in the day where like in Masachet Ksuvot, people met each other a year before they were going to get engaged, and then they met each other a week before the wedding, and that was it. So like there was, or not even a week, they met themselves at the wedding. But nowadays we have that interaction, and I think actually, right nowadays we don't talk, we don't see each other. First of all, it's not written in stone. You could see each other. Right. If that works out better, if you need to, especially here in Israel, when parents haven't met each other before and now they're coming in for the wedding and they're meeting each other for the first time. And I've had this where parents speak different languages. You know what I'm saying? The boy is Israeli, the girl is American. The boy's parents are only Hebrew speakers, and the girl's parents are only English speakers. And they're about to have a dinner together, meeting for the first time. And the couple's like, we really want to be there. Like, go for it, be there. You need to be the interpreters. You need to make sure that that's good. So it's not written in stone. In addition, the no talking before the wedding sometimes builds up more tension, right? Oh, it's gonna be so excited the first time that we speak. It's gonna be amazing. But you just said maybe no, maybe they need to be build up before. And I
So much
also
happened.
think, yeah, I also think if my husband and I were not speaking before we got married, like our wedding would not have happened. I'm not joking. Not because of me and him,
Get
because
it.
of other tensions going around. I don't have to go through personal experiences. There's a lot of tensions regarding the wedding. It really wouldn't have happened. He was like our like calming down person. So like I spoke to him after like tensions and like life happened and we were good. So like he was dealing with the seating and I was dealing with everything else, but like it was like so normal to speak. It wasn't even a question. Like no one did that back then. I got married 20 years ago. Like no one did that back then. So like I think it's a new thing and people have to take everything with a grain of salt and try to make an understanding of like what's good for them. In the same way, by the way, if women are not good fasters, I tell them not to fast. Do not fast at your wedding. I personally have seen women faint at their wedding. Like I have seen that, like numerous kalot faint at their wedding. I've given kalot bread at their wedding because they were about to faint because they drank so much water, but nothing else was inside of them because they didn't eat all day. I literally washed a Kallah's hands once. Like, yeah, I was like, you guys, you have to eat bread, just plain bread, because otherwise it's going to slosh in your stomach and it's going to be bad. So please tell the kalot not to fast if they're not good fasters. I really think we should get rid of that one. It's so bad. And I also think, I know they want to be like, they want to do the thing that's right. And also in terms terms of talking to do what's good for them, in terms of that.
Yeah.
So
They
thank you.
don't even listen when I share it. They're like, whatever.
Like, you're the crazy college teacher. Yeah.
Not even as a college teacher, as a friend, but whatever. I just a personal story on the not fasting. I happened to have lost power at my wedding. It was 115 degrees in the hall. And the only person who thought to bring me Powerade was my chassan.
That's crazy. Did you fast?
I was in the middle of fasting. Yeah, we lost power at like 3 p.m. and it came back on at like 9 p.m. It was the hottest day of the summer.
Oh, that's terrible.
It was crazy. Yeah, but
That's
yeah,
terrible. I hope you broke your fast at like 3.
I did break my fast.
Okay. I got married on Rosh Chodesh, so I didn't have to deal with any of that. But yes, break your fast with Powerade. Amazing, wonderful. But also really think hard about the fasting thing. Really, really think hard about it. Okay. With that being said, we get back to that. Oh, no, more questions. Ella, sorry about that.
All right. My original question was exactly the same as Sarah because I was also told no flirting, but I like what you said, and I think it is about like finding your own boundaries within that situation. But that's funny because it's literally one of the first things. It was like, don't flirt; it'll lead to the wrong thing. But are we going to talk about harchakot in public?
Yeah, I'm about to get to that now. Let's
Okay.
go through. We're going to push through a little bit. We're getting back to it. Whenever I start off this conversation between the Chatan and the Kallah, my favorite line is, okay, so guys, you know the harchakot, you know this behavior during Nidja, right? You've all heard about it. Tell me what you know. Tell me what you learned. If I would ask that, you guys are all learning people, you all know it. But like when I ask that, do you know what the number one thing is? They start off by saying, okay, you're not allowed to touch and you're not allowed to pass. That's the one that they quote first. And I was like, that's really interesting. You didn't tell me about the beds. You didn't tell me about the food. You told me about the no passing. Why is that the first one that you're quoting? And then they'll answer, because it's the most ridiculous one, right? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Why? You think that passing is going to lead to us having sex? Like, that's like, no, it's ridiculous. I'm like, okay, so what is the reason why you think that you're not allowed to pass? And they're like, oh, the reason why you're not allowed to pass is because it's going to lead to sex. And it really doesn't lead to sex, and therefore that. I'm like, if that was the case, you wouldn't be allowed to pass the coins to the makolet man, but you are allowed to pass, right? So that it has to be a different type of reason. And this is where I bring in the sexual space and the non-sexual space, right? We know that, couples, they're allowed to live together, right? We said the whole yichud thing, even though normally they're not allowed to be alone together, they're allowed to live together, even when they're in nida. And we need extra reminders to create this non-sexual space, right? We need to know that when you walk into the apartment, everything is screaming, this is not a sexual space. And it's interesting because when we are creating the sexual spaces, it is very clear, right? On any movie, not that we watch movies and TVs of any sex scenes and we've never seen these before, but if perhaps maybe once you might have seen something, you know that literally right before the scene is about to start, the lights go to a certain color, the music goes on in the background, the people are starting to dance their way in. Like literally, you know that a sex scene is coming. And then you could choose to fast forward or not, right? You can skip the scene or not, right? But you know that it's coming because the scene is set up. And therefore, if you walk into your bedroom and the beds are made nicely with one big sheet and there's a blanket there and the candles are set up and there's like flowers on your bed, you know what's going to happen. It's very clear to everyone in the room. And therefore, let's make it very clear in the room when nothing's going to happen. So if you walk into your room and the beds are really far apart, nothing's going on, right? There's going to be nothing happening. And therefore, based on that, right, we want to create signs in our households that this is not a sexual space. Perhaps the passing is, because passing, you're so used to touching your husband, you need to have an extra reminder to say, this is not a sexual time. And therefore, the passing is a reminder that this is a different type of space. Therefore, you asked about public. There are some people, and this is where I say, like, what do you think about PDA, right? How do you feel about public display of affection? And then they never discussed it before, so I love it. A lot of people haven't, but some people have. And I'll be like, okay, so what do you think about it? They'll be like, oh no, we're never doing public display of affection, or we totally are. And I'm like, okay, what's your definition? They're like, we're gonna hold hands, but we're not gonna make out in public. And I'm like, really? Why aren't you making out in public? They're like, that's gross. I'm like, why is it gross? Oh, because it's not a sexual space. I mean, the public sphere is not sexual. If you saw two people doing sexual things in front of you, you'd be like, I don't need to be here, right? It's not a sexual space. And therefore, when you're in public, there are some people who might, some rabbinic authorities who might be more lenient about the passing because it's never going to lead to anything, right? Not that it leads to it, because it's not a sexual space. And so you don't need the extra reminders to create this as a non-sexual space because the public space is never that. And therefore, people might be more lenient if there's another reason that comes in. And the other reason is, right? The other reason is embarrassment, right? So if this is embarrassment or danger, right? Putting your baby on the bus, on a seat on a bus is not very helpful. It's very dangerous to put your seat on the, your baby on a seat. So therefore don't do it. Or if in the middle of the public, right, everyone's going to know that you are in nida, like you don't need everyone knowing that. And therefore it's not sexual space. You don't need to do that extra harhaka. Although there are some rabbinic authorities that are like, amazing, do it. And then everyone knows that you follow the behavior during Nidja. That's good because you follow halacha. And it's good to teach halacha and to make sure that people do halacha. That's beautiful. So, like, for example, if you have a huge gathering, I don't know, huge gathering. And this happened once at I made a simchat bat right after my daughter was born, and I made a siyum on the Mishnayot. So I was reading the Mishnayot at the very end, and my husband was going to say the Kaddish. And I forgot to set up a shtender in between us. So I'm holding the Mishnah, and now he's next to me. This is a week after I gave birth. He's standing there next to me, and like literally, I'm like, shoot, what do I do with the Mishnah? So I can either put the Mishnah on the floor, A, run to the side, put it on the windowsill so that he could pick it up, or I could just pass it. And I really thought twice about it because I'm like, look, people can know that like there are laws and people do the laws, so I should really make a stick out of it. But on the other hand, it's okay. It's really okay. We're in public. This is not a sexual space. So I literally just passed it. My husband didn't even realize that afterwards. I was like, I just passed you the Mishnah. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, oh, right. Also, because, after pregnancy, you have to have the reminders about like what to do again. So again, people might do a different thing in that situation and they might go to the windowsill, put down the Mishnah, pick it up, etc. But like really, there was no other space to put it. Yeah, Al.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was the only thing that like my college teacher like really emphasized. Like if you're gonna feel super embarrassed, then and she gave this example and it comes up all the time of like when you're sitting at a big meal and
That's what I said.
everyone's passing the challah around or everyone's passing everything and then suddenly you're just putting it down. Like it's super awkward. People notice these things. So I remember she said to me, like, if you're gonna feel like embarrassed, then just pass it.
And and also that's based on the same thing because if you're in public around your table, are you going to be sexual? I mean,
Yeah.
I really hope not. I really hope that you have, your private space for doing your things. You might be affectionate. And that's why I think it's fine for couples to hold hands in public. Again, different authorities have different ideas regarding that. I really do believe that it's important for people to have times for affection that's not sex. So like again, it doesn't have to be in front of your entire family, etc. But walking home from shul when there's no one else around, or even if there are people around, depending on your community norms, I think it's important to be able to find times to show affection and not be sexual. But I think in this case, you're sitting around your table. It is not a sexual space. And the same idea is there. It's embarrassment. It's not a sexual space. I want to add one idea in order to make that a more halakhic approach to it is the question of who started the no passing. So just to bring in one other piece of halakha here, you could see, and this is in source 5 over here. It says, B'machzor vitri, this is the Tosafot, Perish Rav Shmaya, Shayanis Har Rashi, Afilo Shloli Ten Maftech Miado Liada. Rashi was careful not to pass the keys to his wife. So it was something that Rashi and his wife started. All the Tosafot, Rashi's grandchildren, recorded it as halakha, as you can see, and therefore it became halakha. And that's why we do it. But it's not Doraita, Dorabana, V'chule. It is a Rashi added. Hold on, I just need to see if I have a tissue. I will move my microphone as I blow my nose. Okay, Kayla, go for it.
It's like two things. One other thing, it's just crazy to me that I literally never like heard of this. Like when Ella asked about public, I'm like, why is she asking that? I don't like what does that have to do with her cope? Like it's so crazy that like I literally never heard of it. But in that case, if you were teaching me as a Kallah, I would have said to you then like, but when I'm eating cereal, I remember like Sheva Brachot, I was like eating and I was like pass me this. Like, I was just like, because it's also Shabbat Brachot, and like all you want to do is just like not be at Shabbat Brachot, but like that's not like, and it was like breakfast, so it was just us two, but that's not like tension. Do you know what I mean? Like I could argue like, okay, like I feel the same way at home than I would in public, so can I just use that?
You're saying
that
in
make sense?
Shabbat Brachot. No, I didn't understand the case. In
Good
Shabbat Brachot,
question.
you were in, like, where were you when you were
Like,
passing the cereal?
like if you're, yeah, like if because in public there's gonna be like no sexual tension and like you could pass and like it's fine. What if you had a caller that came to you and said also at home?
No, but I would say it's not the sexual tension, it's the sexual space, right? Outside in
Okay.
public is never going to be a sexual space. It just isn't.
Oh,
Your
okay.
line is there. Again, not every rabbinic authority holds by this. And that's why you're going to find your post game. I'm bringing in you different ideas because I want you to be able to teach different types of kalot, right? And what you do personally is going to be based on what your post game say, right? Who your rabbinic authorities, women authorities, whoever you go by. I'm bringing in another idea, and where Rav Shurlo, and it's in your Shalot and Shuvot there, where Rav Shurlo talks about this idea. Beautiful. It's another idea to bring in, understanding that there's a range of opinions regarding public and regarding sitting at a table. Again, you're going to do you as like what feels comfortable, and you're going to teach the Kallah depending on where the Kallah is. I like to put it out there because I think the Kalot have to, make their own educated decisions about where they want to be. They always ask me, what do people do? Everyone always asks me, what people do? I think it's really important, really, really important. You, as a Kallah teacher, are the one to teach her the law, right? You're teaching her the law. If she wanted to know what people are doing, she could ask her friends. Your job is to teach. So I don't say what people do. What do the people really do? I'm like, go ask your friends. My job here is to tell you the law. Your job is to ask your friends. I'm not going to tell you what people really do. And also, I don't want them to base their lives on me. People always do it based on hair covering. They're like, tell me what you do. I'm like, I'm not teaching you hair covering so that you can learn what I do. I'm teaching you a range of opinions so that you can make an educated decision about what you want to do. That's my approach and philosophy towards learning halacha, to know that there's a range that is out there, and therefore they're going to have to find their place within that. Let's move on a little bit here. I'm going to share screen again, and we're going to go on to, I like to divide it up into categories. I'm a very categorical thinker, and therefore there are 4 categories of the harchakot. The first one is touching. I include a flirting within the touching, but there is like the no touching, etc., no having sex, no sexual play. You could also see, right, this is the Rashi, v'lo yoshim miyado liyada shum davar. This is all from the Shulchan Aruch. They're not allowed to pass objects, right? And then in the Ramah, the green, it says here, also throwing objects back and forth, or lahafech asur. And you can see here, right, you're not supposed to throw the objects back and forth. I don't think it's a good idea ever to throw objects back and forth at each other. No, stop. I always say to throw objects at each other. If you're throwing objects at each other, we have to have a longer conversation. Stop. But people interpret this as like, maybe having a catch. I think it's a personal catch where you're like really close to each other. Maybe not the best idea to have a basketball game, but I do believe that you could play tennis across the net if there's something going on there, or volleyball. I remember this only once came up when I was playing volleyball. We were on different teams. I'm like, oh my God, we're like throwing to each other. This is awesome. This could be like trying to figure out if we should keep this, not keep it, but like, is this applicable here? And I really didn't think it was applicable. Okay. So that is category number 1, touching. Let's go to category number 2, which is food. לא יאכל אימה על שולחן אלא אם כן יש שום שינוי, שיש שום דבר מפסיק בין קערה שלו לקערה שלה, לחם או קנקן או שיאכל כל אחד במפה שלו. You're not allowed to eat together on the same table unless there is a shinui, something on the table that tells you that this is a different space, right? So basically you could put anything not connected to the meal. You could put a pen. I don't know, I have so many objects on my table here because it's my parents' apartment here. A water bottle that you're not drinking from. I really don't have anything here. A rubber band, right? Anything that's not connected to the meal, to say this is not a sexual space. It is a reminder so that when you are eating this lovely romantic dinner, you are reminded that this is not a sexual space. This is the same law that is learned out from eating chalavi and bisari on the same table, right? Where you can see, I brought the Gemara. in each of these things, just so you can know, right? This is Rav Shirlo's at number 6, but you could see number 7, Lo yichal zav im zava mipnei hergel avera, right? They're not allowed to eat together on the same table because of hergel avera, and basically it comes up in the same situation with eating chalavi and bisari. If you're eating chalavi, your husband's eating bisari, you need to have something on the table telling you that this is not a romantic space. Sarah.
Is this only for when they're eating by themselves?
Only when you're eating by yourselves. Once you have children together, it's not romantic. It'll never be romantic. And therefore, now this is just the two of you alone together. I'll also add in, it says here, placemats are fine. But it says over here, he is not allowed to eat from her plates, right? He's the one with sexual thoughts. He's like, oh my God, it's the pasta that touched her lips that is now touching my lips. This is amazing. And therefore, he's not allowed to eat from her plate. She's like, it's just pasta. What are you thinking? Right? So she can eat from his plate. However, I really do believe none of the authorities say this anywhere, but I do believe it could be based on Tuman Tahara laws based on the day, back in the day, where she would make the food tameh and therefore he couldn't eat from it. No one agrees with me, but doesn't that make a lot of sense? Okay, fine. So that is he's not allowed to eat from her plates. If they have like a communal plate, like they shouldn't have a communal plate. But if she finishes her food and puts the plate back in the middle of the table, and she's like, all right, everyone can have my leftovers, he could then eat from it. In the same vein, lo yishtem mishirei kosher he is not allowed to drink from her cup, right? You need to have 2 cups. So if you're going on a hike, you need to bring 2 water bottles, unless you want to give it to a stranger in the middle or a child, right? If you have someone drinking it in between, then you could do so. And this always comes up with the wine because if he drinks from the coast, she could drink from the coast, but then he can't drink from it again. And then we're going to talk about pouring later on, but that is part of the idea. He cannot drink from her cup. Okay, so that is both Ashkenaz and Sfard in terms of that one. I'm going to reserve my right to add in one more regarding the eating. And now I'm going to go to category number 3. Category number 3 is beds. Lo yeshev b'mita miyuchedet la, afilu shelo b'fanah. He is not allowed to sit on her bed, even if she's not there. It's the bed that smells like her, reminds him of her, and therefore when he sits down on her bed, he is really in that sexual mode. I also think it could be the Tuman Tahara thing again, but okay, fine. No one agrees with me, right? But he's not allowed to sit in her bed. She's got no sexual thoughts, so she could sit on his bed as long as she wants. She could tie her shoes on his bed, right? Some people will say, listen, if he's there, she shouldn't be doing that. But others will say she could sit on his bed. It's not an issue. With that being said, I can't make the joke to the Kallah, but I always like to make the joke. I don't know, it never goes well with the Kallah. They're like, what? I'm like, why do people have to have set beds? You know, you should switch it up all the time. People should have like, but couples always choose beds. I don't know if this happens to you, but whenever you move into a house or an apartment, people always go for the same side that they always stick with. You got to be really careful in the beginning of your marriage, what side of your bed you're always going to be on. Are you going to be closer to the window or closer to the bathroom? Or maybe that's the same for you guys. I don't know. But I always find it like hilarious. Listen to couples that are always married of how they chose who gets which bed. Closer to the bathroom, the first stop so the kids can come in, or Davka, not the first stop so the kids can't come in. Anyway, the Kallah never get those jokes, but I always think it's funny. On that note, it says also, Asur le'shev al safsal aroch sheminanerev ve'ina mechuberet lekotel. This is an Ashkenazic added, the Rama adds it, that you're not allowed to sit on a long bench that is, it swings back and forth. So if you're thinking about going on a romantic swing ride, you can't do that during the times of Nisa. And therefore, we nowadays apply it to couches, right? That therefore, if there's a couch with one couch cushion, and this comes up with an L-shaped couch. It used to stop coming up, and now it comes up with the L shapes, right? Because the L shape, they have multiple cushions, but then you have the long L. That's one cushion. And therefore, one long cushion, you can't sit together on that couch. You need to have something in between. Put a bag, put a pillow, always keep stuff on your couch to make that space in between. I also love this halacha because there's a chart, and I'll send it to you, which literally talks about the difference between Ashkenaz, Sfarad, right? It's also like the Sfardim according to Rav Ovadia, Sfardim according to Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, and then the Teimanim. And with this halacha, if you go through all the halachot in the Shulchan Aruch regarding the behavior during Nida, when it comes to this one, the Teimani halacha is that they do not have the halacha regarding the benches because there were no benches in Teiman. Everyone sat on the floor. They were a very poor country, and therefore everyone just sat on the floor. If you ever teach a Teimani Kallah or a woman marrying a Teimani, they start to crack up because it's a whole culture about Teimanim and what they do, regarding money and things like that. Anyway, you'll get to know the different cultures when you teach, but basically there were no benches in Teiman, so it doesn't apply to that. Okay, so that is in terms of beds. Let's do see. Vav lo yeshanima bamita. They're not allowed to sleep together in the same bed. Afilu kol achad bebigdo ve'eno gim sobazo. They're not allowed to sleep together in the same bed, even if everyone is fully dressed and they are not touching. This one is more rooted in the Gemara. Let's go to there. What is this? That's process of Tara. It is over here where there is a story. Oh, I hate this story. Don't ever teach a story. It's so bad. It's about the one who dies early in his life and they ask why. Oh, that's a terrible one. I never teach that one. Here it is. Source 9. Ibailahu. This one people use as scare tactics. This source, I never teach it. Don't use it as a scare tactic. Source 9. Ibailu. Nida, isn't Nida allowed to sleep in the same bed with her husband if everyone is fully dressed? Right? There's a shinoi. We normally sleep with without our clothing. At least back in the day, they didn't want to waste their threads on pajamas. So now during Nida, oh my gosh, we'll make a shinoi and we'll wear clothing. Amar Rav Yosef tashma ha'ofo la'im ha'gvina l'shulchan ve'no nachal divrei Beit Shammai. Right? The chicken is going to go on the same table as the cheese and it's not going to be eaten together. And Beit Hillel says, lo la v'lo nachal. It doesn't go on the same table and it's not to be eaten, i.e. you cannot do that. You need to have two separate beds. So the Sephardim suffice with two separate beds with even a kol shehu in between, even a little space in between. And therefore, I do believe everyone tries to figure out, wait, I'll just say it. So the Sephardim suffice with the space in between. The Ashkenazim need a bigger space. Ooh, why did I stop sharing so fast? Hold on. The Ashkenazim need a bigger space based on the Ramah, where it says, "Va'afilu yesh l'kol echad matzah b'fnei atzmo." Even if everyone has their own bedding, va'afilu shochvim b'shtei mitot, even if they're sleeping in two beds, va'mitot no gotzo bazo, and the beds touch each other, then it's going to be asur. I have a cold. It's hard to speak for someone. Much better. Okay. And therefore, based on this, there is a difference between the Sephardim and the Ashkenazim. The Sephardim will suffice with a bed that literally has a little bit of a space in between. So they make this mitah yudit here in Israel, where it's one headboard, two mattresses that you can move the mattresses ever so slightly apart. That is a great contraption for Sephardim. For Ashkenazim, that isn't good because we need two beds that don't touch. Now, everyone always asks me what to do. It's really hard. I literally, someone asked me that today, where they're like, okay, we're Ashki. We went to the store. There's the one headboard, like not headboard. There's this one, mitah yudit, and we could separate the mattresses. Can we do it? And I say, traditionally, Sephardim suffice with a kol shehu, but Ashkenazim need two separate beds. They're like, yeah, but can we do it? And I'm like, traditionally, Ashkenazim do not do that. Yeah, but can we do it? I'm like, what do you want from me? I keep on saying it over to like literally, they want me to say yes, and I'm not going to say yes because Ashkenazim usually that's not the way. We usually have two separate beds with mamash space in between. However, every couple is going to make their own decision regarding their beds. So Ashkenazim also have the option of putting a headboard on the wall as like a picture frame, and you can have one bed attached and another bed that you can like hook up and unattach or tie together and things of the sort. So Ashkenazim will do that. Ashkenazim will do two separate beds. Ashkenazim traditionally do not do that one bed frame with the beds that could separate, unless it's like a separate structure that allows them to separate. Some Ashkenazim say you need one amma, some say you need two amot. And then I'm in an Israeli bedroom right now. Literally, there would be no room to separate the beds here. Like literally, there would be no room. I think you maybe do like a minuscule amount. So basically, to the best of your ability. I want to say one other thing. This is really like a touchy point for some people. So I give them the halacha, right? This is the halacha, but it is a touchy point for some people. So first of all, if you ever go away to your parents' house and you grew up in a queen size bed, and now you're at your parents' house and you're in nida, do you have to say, hey, mom, we can't sleep in our bedroom. We need to sleep in bro's bedroom. We have to kick him out and to sleep, because we need two separate beds? And the answer is no. You can build a mechitza. Rav Kinol talks about the height of this mechitza, 10 tzvachim, build it up, etc. I call it a pillow fort, right? Build your pillow fort in between. This is not a long-term solution. You can do this. With that being said, is that the kalot that are not buying two separate beds? Like, yeah, that's so nice that you're talking about. We're not doing that. I'm like, okay, so what are you going to put in between? Right? Can you think about like, and I give this option of the pillows in between. Like, I know you're not buying two separate beds, but maybe you want to put a body pillow in between, right? You buy a body pillow for nida and that separates it, right? Maybe, you want to think about it in terms of that. So again, I'm not giving permission, like halakhically, I really do believe in the two separate beds. I'm just trying to work with them to allow them to create something in the room that when you come in, it is literally, we are not in a sexual space. So just to think about it in terms of that. What else do I want to say about that? No. Okay. Questions or thought about the bed? Matana.
What about for couples that can't necessarily afford it? What do you tell them? If they have no one helping them out and they had a previous bed.
Okay. So I said this, it's not just like a money thing, but this happened now where the couple is moving into a furnished apartment. They got it for free somehow, whatever. And the master bedroom only has one bed. So I was like, okay, can you think about having a blow up couch? Can you think, like an extra bed, right? Can you think about a cot that you could put next to it? Can you think about a mattress on the floor? Do you want to sleep in separate rooms for the time being until you solve your problem of two separate beds? Like, halakhically, you really ideally need to have two separate beds. If there's no other solution, a long-term solution, it's not really great, do the pillows. But I really think that we could be creative about trying to figure it out. In like, people have been telling me now, the new tradition, like everyone has different things, but like some people said, like in, let's say, for example, in like America, there's some places where people are buying two queen size beds. And that's what they have, like momish two queen. Some even do two kings, some do a king and a twin. Apparently, also, you can have a queen with a pull out, pop out twin. Isn't that cool? That is awesome. So again, in Israel, it's less likely to have those things. We've got beds that are 70 centimeters, 80 centimeters, 90 centimeters, and 100 centimeters. 200s make a king, just so you know that. They're always going to ask you. 200s make a king size bed. 280s make a queen size bed, and 160. So realize like what the sizes of the beds are, and therefore you're going to do the best of your ability. I really don't think it's a great idea to sleep in separate bedrooms when you're in nida. I don't think that that's like a healthy space, because I think that like you need that interaction and that nighttime talking, and it really is like an estranged kind of place. But if that's the only thing that's possible, I did have a couple where they had in their bedroom was the king that they had to have there because it was like a furnished apartment. And in the second, what's it called? Guest bedroom, they had two beds. So they moved into the other bedroom when they were in nida while they were, figuring it out. So people are creative. Should I tell you about the girl who lived on a bus? Oh, this was awesome. There's a girl who lived on a bus. She really did. She lived on a bus. And she was like a shepherdess on a bus, cool. She refurbished the bus. And when she did so, she built the bed into the bus. So therefore, there was only one bed because she was single when she did so. She meets a lovely guy. He's moving into the bus. They have to figure out what to do. So she built a plexiglass kind of mechitza. She gave me pictures of it. It was awesome. Down the middle, because they couldn't really separate the beds. She really couldn't. So like sometimes when you have like Kalavi sink and Bissari sink next to it, and some people have this like plexiglass in between. That's what she had on her bed because it was built into a bus. People are creative. It's good. Yeah, go for it, Matsana.
So I know this couple that the husband's a carpenter, and before her family came from America and made Aliyah in like brought a huge brand new American massive mattress that was like Tempur-Pedic, all these fancy schmancy things. So her carpenter husband built, because she didn't want to get rid of the mattress, he built literally just a plaque of wood and a way to slide the wood in anytime they were in need. And he like measured it wrong, and the rabbi said it was okay. And he measured it wrong, so their feet were touching at one point, and the rabbi like flipped out on him. So I remember that she was telling me he had to rebuild it so that it like curved also around the bed, so there was like no way they could like even see each other. Like the rabbi told him to make it high enough so that like they can't even see each other. So
That's
like they got
hilarious.
creative. It was very interesting.
That sounds great. Love to see a picture of that one. That's hilarious. Yeah, Al.
You said like the one to like there's some people say other things. I had heard, I don't know if this has any halachic source, that it's just as long as the like your blankets don't touch.
So the blankets is based on the second half of the Ramah. Did you see that? I should have said that. The blankets is on the Ramah. What did the Ramah say? The Ramah said, where you go? Afilu im shachuvim b'shtei mitot v'mitot nogot zo bazo. Right? So that you can have your mitot. And over here, afilu yesh l'kol echad matzah bifnei. So even if everyone has their own bedding. So based on this, in order to have two separate beds, right? And we want to have everyone having their own bedding. So as long as the bedding doesn't touch. So I
I
think
was
it's an
gonna say, like,
interpretation of the Ramah.
definitely like people probably do not have room to separate that much.
I remember also like there's a lot of feelings. Like we lived in one of these Israeli bedrooms, which was super, super small. And like we had two end tables in order to separate the beds. It was either that the end tables went in the middle of the room in between the two beds, or we had to think of something else. And for me, that was like such a sign. I couldn't have the end tables in the middle. So I literally made my husband like take out the end tables outside the room. So like literally they were in a different space because I just didn't want the end tables in the middle. Even though there are, by the way, and Lubavitch, I heard this in the Lubavitch, for Chabad, that their tradition is to have two separate beds always and to have the end tables in the middle. So that is something that is Chabad. Again, you have to, if you're teaching someone who's Chabad, you have to ask them what their minhagim are. But there are some people, because it's always about what do we do with the beds, right? So we're always like, oh, quickly put the beds together so that no one knows you're an Ida. But Dafka, maybe it should be the opposite. Always keep your beds apart so that no one knows that you're sexually active. And there were many generations where people did that. And therefore, also, I know within the Hasidic community, they have two separate beds. And then when people want to have sex, one goes into the other bed, they have sex, and then they go back to their bed, and that's it. Right? They don't sleep together in this big bed trying to figure out how to do it together. It's just two separate beds. So again, if you want to have two, the big bed together with your like, spongy thing that goes in the middle, we have to also take it with a grain of salt and think about where we're coming from. With that being said, what else I want to say? It's also really good for your kids to know that you have two separate beds. I remember once I gave birth and we had separated the beds, and my daughter was like, "Oh my God, you guys do this?" She's like, "I just learned about this in school. I didn't think you separated the beds." I'm like, "Hun, I was 9 months pregnant. You don't remember, but like I was 9 months pregnant, and like that's why we had the beds together. But yes, we do this law." And so if there's a memory in your mind of your parents doing this, then it's not so odd. It's not like, oh, this is weird. It's like, oh, there's sometimes that we don't. Like kids can jump in the middle, have a little, like pool party doing a slide into the middle of the beds. And then they're like, okay, this is normal. And I think it's also good to normalize some of these things regarding Nita. On the other hand, some people like to be super private. So again, it's all up to you. Okay, moving on. Right. So we go back to the next. So category number, we're up to 4, right? We had category 1, the touching, category 2, the eating. Category number 3 was the beds. Category number 4 is the dress. He is not allowed to stare at her heel and not the covered parts. Heel is a euphemism for sexual parts. He's not allowed to stare. Histaklut is to gaze with sexual intent. If you want to glance, glancing is fine, right? That's not problematic. It's staring with sexual intent. It's talking about him. She's allowed to stare as much as she wants. She has no sexual thoughts, right? No, but the idea being here is that, first of all, he's allowed to stare at her beautiful parts. And therefore, you do not have to change in the bathrooms. You're more than welcome to change in the bathrooms. Every couple is going to set up their own rules, right? But you're not allowed to prance around naked together, right? There has to be a certain level of dress that you wear in front of each other. So again, when you're changing, you don't have to change in the bathrooms. People should not look, stare, etc. And some people are like making sure not to see completely undressed at all. And some people are like, okay, I'm just not looking, right? But the idea being is that there are 3 levels of tzniut. There's a level of tzniut that we wear on the streets, right? So for example, on the streets, we're gonna wear our sleeves, like whatever sleeve length you guys wear. We're gonna wear, our skirts or whatever else you wear to your knees, not to your knees. I don't know whatever one wears, right? And we're gonna be wearing, proper whatever hair covering things of the sort. When we come home, what do we wear? What is that like? And that is category number 2 of tzniut, right? The second level of tzniut. Usually when it's a day like today and it's 100 degrees outside, or what do you say, 40, 30, I don't remember, right? It's 100 degrees outside, right? You're going to take off some of your clothes and you might walk around in shorts and a t-shirt. You might like rip off your hair covering, make sure to air out the hair, everything of the sort. That's category number 2. Category that's like outside behavior, category number 2. And then there's bedroom behavior. There's no tzniut in the bedroom. You can walk around naked. A husband and a wife are allowed to see each other completely undressed. There are no isurim regarding that, right? So you're allowed to. However, during the times of nida, you should be keeping level 2. You should not be walking around with bedroom behavior, right? You should be walking around in your whatever you're used to walking around. And that's why Rav Moshe talks about the hair covering, right? If you normally walk around with your hair covered, then during the times of nida, you're going to have to walk around with your hair covered. And there are certain communities that do that. So, for example, also in the Chabad community, right? They cover their hair during nida. That means that she has to sleep in her hair covering during nida, right? Because he's not used to seeing it, right? She's always covering it. And therefore, it's a sexual space. And that's why when she's in nida, she will have to cover her hair even in her sleep. However, if you normally take off your hair covering and he's used to seeing your hair, then it's not sexual and you can walk around that way. In the same way, your shorts and your t-shirts, you might not want to wear your sexiest shorts and t-shirts, right? Something that's like appropriate, but you're allowed to sleep in that clothing when you're sleeping during nida. So again, those are the 3 levels of tzniut regarding nida. In terms of like voice, not the time to sing a serenade, take the microphone and sing to him in a way that's going to sexually arouse him. However, if you're singing while doing the dishes or you have a voice like mine, so then you're going to be fine. And therefore, you're allowed to sing, in your own way in the shower, belt it out, go for it. It is not a sexual space, and therefore you can do that. So that is the last category, but I still reserve my right to add on some more. So are we ready to add on some more? Here we go. So now we're going to go to, right? And we also have, you can always see her over here. It used to be back in the day that they wore clothing for nida, but nowadays we don't need that clothing to remind us that we're in nida. And it used to be that it was difficult for the woman to dress nicely because we were afraid he was going to be sexually attracted to her. However, nowadays, Kadesh lo titzka now ba'ala, so she won't be ugly for her husband. We allow her to dress nicely. Now we go to Masachet Ktuvot. Masachet Ktuvot, I think, is amazing and awesome because it talks about all the obligations that a husband has for his wife and a wife has for her husband. And I think it's really important that people know what those obligations are. We're going to have a lecture on prenuptials, but this is actually the time I bring up the halachic prenuptial, right? Because we're talking about obligations that people have for each other. So this is where I bring it up. And this is also, by the way, where I start to give my advice, my marriage advice, which we're going to have a lecture on regarding communication. I bring it up here, right? When talking about how to communicate during the times of nida, different communication styles. You're going to have a lecture on this, so I want you to think about it in your own way. But I bring it up during the times of nida when I have both the couple here. With that being said, right, Masachet Ktuvot talks about what the wife has to do for the husband has to do for the wife. So, for example, did you know that you have to give your husband all the money that you make? And he has to provide in response to what he gives you? Mizonot, all the food. Now, you could say, hun, I'm not giving you the money that I make. Right? He's like, fine, I'm not giving you food. And that's a fine agreement. And that's why it'll be interesting to see based on finances, there are couples that don't have joint bank accounts. Right? That's okay. I know that's crazy, but there are couples that don't have joint bank accounts, and that's totally fine. But I think that people have to talk about finances. People get divorced based on money. Like that's a big issue. And therefore, people should be open regarding their finances. They have to think about what their values are regarding money. And it really does come up throughout a marriage. I see it a lot during like the wedding planning, the values of money. And I think it's a great time to talk about it, to talk about what money means to each person and what that means for them as a couple and etc. But I'm not getting into that right now. I'll focus on the halachic piece here. And it says here, in Masachet Tuvot, Elu malachot she'isha osa leba'ala. The following malachot a woman does for her husband. I hope you ladies all do this. Tochanet, you grind up the flour, you bake, you mechabeset, you do the laundry, you mevashelet, you clean, you menikapena, you nurse your child, you matzalo amita, you get the bed ready for sleep, and you osa b'tsemer, you sew. How many people here know how to sew? Raise your hands. That is it. You have all failed marriage. Don't worry. Hechnisa lo shivcha achat. We're all going to bring our stuff to Jazzy. Hechnisa lo shivcha achat. If you bring in one maidservant, lo tochenet, lo ofa, v'lo mechabeset. Shtayim, em eveshav, em nikapena. Shalosh, em otzat lo mitav, eno sabetzemer. Right? See, if we have three maidservants, Jazzy doesn't have three maidservants. But we have three maidservants because I just hire someone to sew. Her name is Shelly Bloom. She lives in my yeshuv, and she literally sews all our buttons. I like to call it hire husband, hire Shelly Bloom. Like it all works out. I always tell people if you think that you're going to hire a fix-it man and then your husband isn't that fix-it man, do you know what you do? You hire a husband, you pay someone else, and a fix-it man comes in and they do everything that you expected your husband to do. And all you have to do is pay them money and they listen to you, every single thing that you want. It's amazing. But it really does stop a lot of fights if you realize what your roles are, what your abilities are. So to us, it's hire Shelly Bloom for the ripped pants that goes on. With that being said, Arba Yoshevet B'Katedra. Arba, four, you get, if you have four maidservants, you get to sit upon a throne. Rabbi Lezer says, even if you have 100 maidservants, you're never allowed to sit upon a throne because B'Tela Viviali Dezima, idleness leads to promiscuity, and therefore we always teach her how to sew. Okay. A source 11. Arba Yoshevet B'Katedra. Av Amar Rav Yitzchak Bar Chanina Amar Rav Huna. Even though you're allowed to sit upon the throne, aval, you always have to pour your husband the cup. Matzalo amitai, you get the bed ready for sleep. And you have to wash his hands, face, and feet. Source 12 tells you that even though you have to do these three actions, all the malachot that Nida does for her husband, right? Woman does for her husband, and Nida is allowed to do for her husband, except for these three: mizigat hakos, hatat lo mitah, and merachat lo panav yadav raglav. So let's talk about it. What are these three actions? So first of all, pouring him a cup of wine, and that's where the Sfardim only interpret it as wine. We Ashkis interpret it as all drinks and plating the food. Where are my Brits? No Brits out there that plate the food? Okay, it's a British thing. They always plate the food. With that being said, it says over here, right? See if you had, right, exactly that. Asura limzok hakos. She cannot pour him a cup of wine and put it on the table. Unless she does it with a heker, with some kind of noticeable way that she's doing it. So pour it with your left hand, pour it with your right hand, do it in, or not your right hand, because that's the way that you pour if you're righty, but do it with some kind of heker, and then you're allowed to pour it. And it's the same thing if you want to, plate his food, put it with a sign that you know that this is not a sexual thing. And I think it does make sense, right? Your husband isn't making cups of coffee for everyone in the household. He's making it for you. Your husband isn't pouring wine for everyone at the table. He's pouring it for, oh, sorry, the opposite. Just kidding. You're not making a coffee for everyone. You're making it for him. And you're not pouring wine for everyone at the table. You're pouring it for him. I do want to say, by the way, the reason why I just slipped up there was because Kashem Shasura Lim Zoglo, Kachu Azor Lim Zogla. Just like, right, we're going to be equal opportunity. She can't pour him. He is not allowed to pour her, right? So it's the same thing. And that's why we have the Mischak Hayayin. And the Mischak Hayayin, this whole dance around the pouring of the wine, he's making Kiddush, putting it down again. I don't know where it comes from, who's the feminist and who's making the Kiddush and who's not. You don't have to be feminist. We can talk about that. But I'm just using him as an example. He's making the Kiddush. He puts it down. She takes the cup of wine and drinks it. Or he pours out for everyone at the table. She takes the wine and drinks it. Or he pours for himself. She takes the wine and drinks it, but he cannot pour directly for her. So that's also what's happening with the wine. Categories 2 or 3. Yeah, go for it, Sarah.
Wait, so With Sephardim, it's just wine, and Ashkenazim, it's all drinks.
All drinks and food.
Right. But okay, I don't know why I just have I don't have the memory of all the drinks. So you're saying that like if a husband makes a wife coffee every morning, that during Nida he can't make the coffee. Let's say she's not even in the room. He just like prepares it for her.
He can, but he should do it with the shinoi.
She know. I don't know why I don't remember that. Okay, thanks.
It's all good, all good. You'll see when Aurora Sutton comes on. Let's hear how she teaches this, right?
Yeah.
Because she's giving you the Sephardic feel, which I think is so important. I'm not Sephardic. I just learned from the Sephardim what it is. And it'll be interesting to see those differences. Kallah.
So saying like as an Ashkenazi, like, hey, could you get my water bottle? Could you add water? You can't do with it has to be with the shinoi.
Is that interesting? Because you're not going to pour water for everyone. You know what I'm saying? You're not going to like fill up everyone's water bottle. It's a specific thing that's unique for you.
Okay.
Okay. With that, the other two are more difficult to come up with examples, but here we go. You're not allowed to get the bed ready for sleep. It is taking off the bedspread. Oh, I love teaching in this apartment. My parents is not really making fun of them at all in any which way, but they have bedspreads. I'm not joking. Look at that. That's from the 1970s. We can all so unique. It's amazing and wonderful. Not only do they own it, they brought it from their house in Teaneck and they brought it here. It's amazing. What does a bedspread do? It covers the bed so that no dust gets on it. And when you're trying to go to sleep, you take off the bedspread. And Abigail, this one's for you. It's actually from South Africa long ago. They had like cousins who made it. But anyway, they take it off and then you sleep on the bed. So I think this law applies in this bedroom. If someone is taking off the bedspread and getting ready for sleep, that's what's a sword. But making the bed is not a sword. That's really, really annoying. So that's why I don't think it's about making the bed. There are some poskim who do think that, but most poskim hold that it's getting the bed ready for sleep. So it's really not applicable. And the other one, you're not allowed to pour him a basin of water to wash his hands, face, and feet. Welcome home, honey. Here's a basin of water, right? You can't do that. I found one practical example of this. Orchat on Pesach. My mother-in-law brought my father-in-law a basin of water. I'm like, amazing. Now I have a good example of this. You cannot do that on Orchat's. Bring him a basin of water. So he's like, oh, thanks, honey. I'll wash my, right? But other than that, I don't know. What is it like turning on the dude to allow the hot water to boil? Drawing the bath. I mean, I'm sure you guys all draw baths for your husbands. So it could be interpreted as that, but it's really not practical, these last three. Yeah, Kallah.
That's so interesting. I gave birth on like a Arab Shabbos, and so Shabbos, David brought me like a bowl. I mean, I guess it was a chula sheyesh b'sakana, but he brought me a bowl and everything to wash, like for bread, because I was just like in the bed. I like couldn't walk, so I guess
That's
it would be,
beautiful.
but that is
Yeah. But chol
awesome.
sheyesh b'sakana, but yes,
Yeah,
mamash.
that's interesting.
Beautiful. Yeah, Al.
Can you just repeat what you're saying about the bed, like the bedspread, so that it's not a problem because it's not for bedspread? I didn't really get
No,
that.
taking off the bedspread is problematic. Making the bed is not. Some people are like, oh, you can't make his bed. You can make his bed. That's annoying. Who likes to make a bed? But taking off the bedspread, that's the way that Rav Knoll interprets it also in the book. But maybe some of you have learned that you're not allowed to make the bed. So I don't know.
I learned that you can't make his bed.
You can't make his
I
bed.
think unless he's not home.
Unless
Or
he's not home.
maybe that was about sitting on his bed. I think she taught me that I can sit on his bed, but only when he's not
When he's not at home.
home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look it up in Rav Knoll. Let's see what he says also, because there are differences of opinion regarding that. I think all the harchakot have to be taken with a grain of salt. These are not doraita. They are not derabanan. They're extra added. I guess if you want to call it a derabanan, because there are rabbis that added them in, right? Rashi is a rabbi. He added it in. And therefore, in the case of need, we are going to be more lenient. So, for example, now the Shulchan Aruch is harsh about this. So look what the Shulchan Aruch says if someone is sick. He is sick and there's no one else around. Muteret l'shamsho, she's allowed to help him out. Rak shetizeher biyoter shetuchal lizeher b'chatza panav yadzav raglav v'atza amitza b'fanav. If he is sick, you have to be careful. That's interesting, Kayla, right? If he is sick, you have to be careful about washing his hands, face, and feet. That the opposite direction was interesting, right? You have to be careful about washing his hands, face, and feet. But you can help him out. And the theory was when the man is sick, like he's not able to move around, he's not able to do anything, and therefore, he doesn't have a sexual drive. But he's shacholav, he nida, a woman is sick and she's a nida, asur l'bala ligaba. The husband is not allowed to touch her in order to help her out. In order to help her sit up, etc. Point blank, that's the end of the Shulchan Aruch. However, the Ramak comes in. Listen, if there's no one else around, mutar bakol, then you are allowed. And therefore, even the Sephardim, Rav Ovadia, Paskins like the Ramah in this case. And that's why if there's no one else around, you can help your wife out. So all the harchakot are taken with a grain of salt. Your wife is falling down the mountain. What do? You save her, right? That's what you're going to do, right? If she can't get up in the middle of the night to go pee because she just had a C-section, what are you going to do? Help her get up and pee. She's not peeing in the bed, right? There you go, right? She's not getting up and peeing in the bed. You don't have to hire a night nurse to help you out of the bed in the middle of the night. He is coming around, giving you a hand and helping you out of bed. That's a sick person. And also you don't want her to pee in the bed. If you are throwing up in the middle of the night and your hair is getting in there, literally, what is he going to do? He's going to give you a rubber band, literally give you that rubber band. He might even take your hair and put it into the rubber band so that you can throw up. There's no one else around, right? That is human nature. And therefore, again, we are going to be strict when there's sexual experiences around or like sexual spaces. We will be strict, but we're also going to take it with a grain of salt. And we're going to say that this is human, right? There are cases where people are going to not be following the harchakot because that incident doesn't allow for it. And that's where Rav Benny always, like where Rav Benny Lau was talking about in terms of touching in the labor room. It's not that the harchakot don't apply in those situations. It's that there's another issue that overrides it. Right. So literally the issue of human dignity or the issue of saving a life, that's going to override it in that instance. But the second that instant is over, right, she finished throwing up, you're not going to brush out her hair for her. You know what I'm saying? Right. She finished it. That incident is over. She's done throwing up. Then you move away. She's went to the bathroom and pee, right? You're good. So then you're not going to hold her anymore. Right. So that's the idea of being like taking it with a grain of salt, but also understanding, right, that there's certain instances where we're not going to be following the harchakot, and that is okay. Thoughts or questions? Sarah.
No, I was just gonna ask if this is where you teach the source for like a man cold. Like if this was the source for like,
yeah, but I gotta
like
tell
a man
you,
needs the help and women.
I gotta tell you, in my household, it's the opposite.
Lucky.
When my husband is sick, I'm like, come on, get up, do the Aruchat Asher, you gotta go. And he like pulls himself out of bed and he literally makes all the sandwiches. When I have a cold, I'm literally in bed sleeping the whole time. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sick. I have a cold, I can't function. So I take the man colds with a grain of salt because like, oh my God, we are so the opposite in our family.
Well, you're the exception.
There you go. I'm an exception, but like I always like I say, listen, most men, women, people put each other in boxes, but it's not true in every household.
No,
Don't
but
tell
this
my
would be a
husband.
great. This is a great usage of it. It's funny.
It's so true. Jazzy.
I'm curious.
Oh, you just went mute.
I'm curious because you said earlier, like we know like 90% of people like aren't being shomer once they're engaged, whatever. If with like the harchakot, like if we have like a sense of like where the majority of people are holding these days, or like what people really follow or don't, like just out of
There was
curiosity.
that, yeah, there were people who did studies on this. Naomi Grumman, I think, has more of the statistics on it, but there were statistics on it on what people follow and what people don't. So I don't remember the statistics, but I think many people are following the no sex and the no sexual touch. Not passing, not so many people are following. So you can imagine the spectrum of it. But that's with the Orthodox people. We're not talking about ultra Orthodox. We're not talking about Haredi world. We're not taking, like I think in the Haredi world, they're really serious about this. And what's interesting is that like they're really serious and they actually do it, right? And that, where it's more open. So like there's definitely different room and room for that. But again, everyone in their own communities. So I could just show you to the studies and you can look them up online, right? Of studies that are done based on this. But I really think our job as college teachers is to teach it. We are the ones educating. So they're not coming to us to find out what people are doing. They're finding out the information, as I said before. And I think that, even if people aren't following it, I do think that there's a positive to talking about it because even if they're like, yeah, we're going to end up, doing whatever we're doing, talking about the no passing, they're like, yeah, that doesn't apply to us at all. I still think I want to say, listen, there are people who do this. And some people say that so that in the future, in case they want to do more. And some people say that because they should know what Jewish law is. Know what Jewish law is. There's like a range. I'm not doing that for a couple that's coming in for one session. I'm talking about for people who want to learn and want to know, even if they're not doing that. It's interesting to point out what some people do. And like also to less mock the system and to know like there's reason behind it. At this point, also during the time, I also talk about the importance of finding time together, and being able to establish time that's non-sexual time. I take the 5 languages of love with a very big grain of salt. Everyone puts themselves in boxes. Oh, my love language is touch, and therefore I won't be able to follow this. We have lots of love languages, and just because you might think that you're one doesn't mean you can't try something else. It's what you're used to, what you've grown up with, and let's be experimental and try something else. I don't write love poems, but you know what? Every once in a while, I totally could write a nice note, and it's not beyond me to do that. And let's push ourselves and try different love languages. So it is an opportunity to try something different. I think that we have to find the time together. Every couple in general, this is where I give them all my first year advice, right? About like being married for the first year. It's about establishing who you guys are. It's about building time together. And like every couple learns how to hang out together. I think every couple needs to find the time. So, for example, when the Laus, Benny Lau and Rabbanit Noah Lau spoke to us, Rabbanit Noah Lau is the head of the OATSET program. So she was like, listen, every night we teach a lot, we work a lot. Every night we come home and we close out the night with a cup of tea. Isn't that nice? So beautiful. So every night they have a cup of tea together. Me and my husband adopted us, right? I adopted that shita, changed it ever so slightly, right? Because like we finish our classes here at 10 o'clock at night. I'm gonna have to, hang out, catch up about our day. We do it with a glass of wine. But you guys are all open to do whatever you want. Started out with the 30 shekel of wine, it's 30 shekel bottles of wine. Now we're up to the 50. We'll see what we'll get to with how many kids we have. No, stop. But like it's nice to be able to every night close out the night and make your routines, establish your rituals. The first year of marriage is establishing your rituals. And we really take a lot of what we learned from our parents, knowingly or not knowingly, right? For example, where do you guys sit at the table? Do you sit at the head? Does your husband sit at the head? Do you guys sit like this at the head? Do you sit next to your husband over there? Like, where do you guys sit? Are you ready? Me and my husband sit in the middle of the table. We do. We don't take it in from our parents because our parents totally sat at the heads. But like we sit in the middle of the table because we are the center of attention. You're coming to our meal and no one gets in between us. Like no kid is allowed to sit in between Abba and Ema. We always sit next to each other. So much so that we once wanted to buy a bench to like sit on. You have to figure out during you know what to do with it. But like the bench that we can always sit on together that like no one's in between. And that's first year of marriage, right? Establishing your rituals, establishing your behavior. And I think also taking in from our families. I have to tell you my favorite story. Did I tell you my chicken salad story? I always tell the story, right? My chicken salad story. Our first Shabbat, I made chicken salad. And, I like chicken salad, a little bit of lettuce, tomato, avo, put a little chicken, dressing, all that. Amazing chicken salad. Bring it to the table. And my husband's like, what is this? I'm like, chicken salad. He's like, this is not chicken salad. Chicken salad is where you take the chicken, mash it up, add in the mayonnaise. Yeah, bring it on. Chicken salad, tuna salad, chicken salad. And our conversation can look like this. My chicken salad is right. And he's like, no, my chicken salad is right. And guess where this conversation is going? Nowhere. But if I'm like, you know what, Shuey, my husband's Shuey, where does your chicken salad come from? And he's like, oh, I'm from the Lower East Side. Great Bubby aunts, I don't know, Zadie, whatever. They used to want to like make their chicken last longer. So they took the chicken, they mashed it up, they added in mayonnaise, spread it on bread, made it into a way to keep the chicken going because we were really poor back then. So it was really meaningful to us to have this chicken salad. And he's like, Judith, where does your chicken salad come from? And I'm like, oh, I'm Teaneck, New Jersey. We're like the healthy people. We like exercise all the time. We like eat like healthily. And therefore, it's really important to me for us to have healthy chicken salad without the mayonnaise, with the little avocado, lemon, and olive oil, right? That's what we're going to be eating. It's like, oh, now I understand why this is so meaningful for you, right? Because words have meaning. It's not just about eating food where we can choose what we want. It's about where it comes from and our family values. Now, this is just chicken salad. We're really, going to work this one out. But I think that this has to do a lot with that first year of marriage, understanding the other person's values. And therefore, a marriage is about curiosity. It's about trying to understand the other person. It is not about proving each other right. I'm right. No, I'm right. No, we're never getting anywhere. But it's about understanding, curiosity. Tell me about that. And therefore, I want to impart the messages to the newlyweds, right? To always be curious about your partner. Be curious about why they're saying what they're saying, right? Understanding that piece. And therefore, your marriages will go so much longer when you could do so. There's even tools to be able to do so, right? If I would repeat back exactly what my husband said, my chicken salad comes from dot, 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 dot. It's called tamago. And I say to him, did I understand you correctly? He's like, no, no, it was a little bit different. And he sharpens it. And he's like, did I understand you correctly? And like, you sharpen it. And then you say it again, you feel understood. So much in our life, we want to feel understood. So to be able to have those healthy conversations, you're going to hear from people talking about communication. So I'm not going to say everything that they're going to say, but that's my take on it. And this is the time that I talk about healthy communication. And this is the time that I talk about some of the things regarding first year of marriage, leaving your toothpaste in the sink, leaving your sneakers by the door, learning to change, learning to live with someone. So bring on the marriage advice. They love that. Okay, Kallah, go for it.
So you touched on this like in the beginning with like like them saying like passing is a second. So if a Kallah says like, I remember in middle school or like high school, we'd always be like so annoying to our teachers. We'd be like, high five's not gonna lead to sex. You don't have to be shomer. And like that was like how we like started every discussion. So if a Kallah says to like, okay, but like passing salt or passing stuff won't lead to sex, how would you see like that conversation playing out?
I would just be like, oh, but perhaps there's also another idea that this is a reminder. We don't think that passing the salt is going to lead to sex. It won't lead to sex. But because you're doing something awkward, it's a reminder that this is not a sexual space. Right? I don't need that. And I remember the first time I was in Nida, like right after I got married, and I needed to give the keys for the copy machine to my boss back. And I literally so obviously put the keys on the table instead of passing it to him. I'm like, oh my God, I could pass to you. This is so embarrassing. Right. Because like you don't like now, of course, he probably didn't think twice about it, but like it was so obvious. I was doing it so awkwardly and obvious that I was like, oh my God, this was an obvious sign. And I think that's what happens with your husband. You're making these like obvious signs, and it reminds you, wait a second, this is not a sexual space, which is probably why everyone hates it because it's so obvious. Rachel.
So I always kind of, not always, but like I guess over the years of being married, I kind of feel like harchakot are something that's a bit like subjective, based on your personal relationship and how you generally behave in your marriage. So with that being said, is it fair to say that like once you've been married for a certain amount of time and you are familiar with how this system works, like you're familiar with how you as a couple work and also how NIDA works and how you guys work within NIDA and like all of that, like to kind of like figure out which harchakot are important for you as a couple to have as reminders and which ones are like you don't like, I don't know. Is that wrong to say like
I just think it's a slippery slope. It's like, it's like the people who are saying like, within Judaism, I know how Shabbos works. I know the message that we want for Shabbat. And therefore I could tell when I do certain things that it doesn't affect this Avirah and the greater picture of Shabbat. So I know myself, so I'm not going to do it.
I hear
Right?
you.
There's a system, it's a system of law. And the second that we play with the system of law, it starts to unravel. So I
Mm.
understand I'm going to help. Like if you were a Kallah that I was talking to and she was like, I'm having a really hard time and I know, and etc. I'll be like, okay, establish your boundaries, make your, like do an educated choice, like make educated decisions. But on the other hand, I hear the system.
I hear it. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Ladies, we're going to take a 10-minute break. Aurora Sutton is going to come in and speak about Sparta Kalaka. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. At that time, as we drive back, I'm going to be driving. So I'm going to, hopefully there's not going to be any breaks or whatever. I'm going to be driving back home. I'll listen to it, whatever, with the closed screen. I think I might actually make her host to make sure that that happens. And with that being said, therefore, I'm going to tell you what's going on for next week. So with next week, because I like to make sure that we know, oh, next week I am not going to be on because next week it's a good week. They're always good weeks. But next week on June, oh, we don't have because there's Shavuos. And then the week after we have Gabriella Hodes, which is excellent. She's going to go through as a college teacher some of her greatest tools. So if you feel like you've been like thrown information and you haven't been able to process and to think about teaching, she's going to get you to really process about teaching, what she's been taught over the years regarding the Kallah classes, and what might be some useful tips in order to give it over. That's a 2-hour lecture again. So we're going to break at that time at 9 o'clock at night. And then at 9 o'clock at night, Rifki Chudnoff is going to come in and speak about pelvic floor pain. So pain within pelvic floor, that's also super important. Learning how to relax the muscles, opening up the muscles. So that's going to be the 3 hours. They'll be broken up, the 2 hours and a 1 hour, just if you're planning when to take your break and things of the sort. So that's for the week after. We're going to have Aurora Sutton. I'll introduce her when she comes on. So we're going to take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back. Sounds good? Okay. Okay, ladies, we're back. Welcome, everyone. Come, let's get back from our break. Let's introduce our speaker. All right. Good to see you all. Okay, good.
Hi, I'm just having a little bit of trouble accessing my PowerPoint. I don't know if you hear me.
Oh, whoops, I was speaking without my phone on my thing. I was like talking without that.
No
What'd you say?
problem. It's Aura. I'm having a little
All right.
trouble accessing my PowerPoint. I need another minute.
That is fine. That is
Okay,
great.
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, we can discuss until we're ready with the PowerPoint. I feel like we can discuss. Are there any issues that came up people want to raise as we wait? Feelings or thoughts towards the behavior during NIDA? Okay. Feelings or thoughts towards Yom Yerushalayim? Did any of you go out? Did any of you go? No, I don't even see half of you in blue and white. What is up with this? No.
I work in a children's home and they did a tekes, which was really cute. Like the younger kids did the tekes for everyone and they did like skits about the whole story
Oh,
of like,
nice.
it was really cute. So that was cute.
That's nice. That's good. That's nice. We were gathering my children here because my parents are in visiting. So they have an apartment here in Jerusalem. So we're here. And so then we took my parents to the parade. Then they went out for dinner. It's so sweet. It's such a good time. We like it. It's a big parade. No. Okay. All right. How you doing? All right. Well, you have to, there you go.
Good. I wish I was doing a little bit better. I'm still having a little trouble. I'm not sure why. I'm actually trying to open on another computer, but that's not.
Do we have the PowerPoint from last time? Like, is it this?
It's possible, but I don't know who.
I'm going to ask Naomi if she has it.
Right. I don't know if Naomi, it's usually done through someone else. Search, I could not find it on the email. like this might work. Let me see. I'm on my computer. There we are. Recording in progress. Michael.
Okay, is this working? Does everybody hear me?
Let me hear you. I don't
Yeah.
see a PowerPoint, but you know what? Let me also.
No, I have the PowerPoint now. I'll share it in a minute.
Oh, okay, great.
I'll share the screen in a minute. Yeah, I just wanted to having trouble doing that. Okay,
Okay, so let me
Wonderful.
first introduce you.
thank you.
Okay, so first of all, I would like to introduce Aura Sutton. She has a BA in Judaic Studies and Philosophy, a master's in Jewish Education, and currently is in Azrieli's program for an EDD. She's taught 30 years in high school and adult education in Judaic Studies, right? And Tanakh, Jewish philosophy, and a 12th grade class in Taharat Mishpacha, which is a course at Magen David Yeshiva in the Sephardic community in Brooklyn, New York. So she very much is well known in the Sephardic community in New York and all over the place. And we are really honored for you to be here with us because I think it's really important to understand the differences of law, you know, between different in different places, and being able to hear straight from someone who works so much within the Sephardic community is so important. So I'm happy to have you here tonight. I'm going to make you host. I'm going to be in through my phone and listening as we drive back, but I'm going to be driving back to my house now. So I'm making
That's
you host. If there's anything also that goes on, you can always text me. So let me
Not a
just.
problem. Thank you so much for your help and thank you everybody for your patience. Okay.
Oh, good.
So I'm going to
So
get right into it. I want to first preface by saying that the halachot that I am going to reference are all based on Chacham Ovadia Yosef, alav shalom, either from his the main sefer that he wrote on Taharat Mishpacha, or his children wrote more abridged versions. Okay, so there's Torat HaTahara, Taharat HaBayit, different Sfarim that, and you'll see in the PowerPoint, you'll see where all those sources are. The reason I say that is because Sephardic halacha is not uniform. Okay, you have different rabbis within the Sephardic world who may be posek one way or another, but what I'm presenting to you today is all based on Chacham Ovadia. Okay, so I just want that to be clear. Some of the things you may have learned in a different context in this course, and some of it, I'm hopeful that some of it's going to be new. Keep in mind that if you ever have questions about Sephardic halacha, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. I'll make sure to share contact information either on the chat or with Naomi to make sure that you have that in the future. Okay. So I'm gonna start the PowerPoint now, and let me see how I do this. Oh, am I able? Yes, I can share screen. Terrific. This will be a problem. Am I able to share my screen? After all that, looking for the PowerPoint, I can't share my screen. That's not going to be good. Oh, maybe I can. Second. Here. So I need someone to tell me if they're able to see the screen.
Not yet.
Oh, here we go. Now, hold on. You're not able to see the screen, are you? Somebody shake your head if you're able to see the screen.
It
Not
says it started sharing. I don't see the screen.
It's loading. It's not, it's loading. Okay. I'm gonna get started and hope for the best. It's saying it's loading, so I'm hoping that's going to help, okay? The first topic that we have has to do with poletet shechvat zera. The amount of time that it takes for semen to sort of be released or to be removed from the woman. And this applies to what we call minimum bleeding days, the minimum amount of days that a woman will have to wait before she can do her hefsek b'tahara. I think you can now see the screen. I hope you can. Terrific. Okay, great. Okay. So what we have here is the idea that a woman must count 7 clean days. She has to have 7 clean days before she can go to the mikvah. Okay, and not only they have to be clean from seeing blood, but also from shechvat zera. I'm going to read from the second paragraph here. לפיכך אישה ששימשה עם בעלה ואחר כך ראתה דם, so a couple had relations, and then she happened to see blood. אפילו אם פסק הדם כליל, even if the blood completely stopped, we don't know how much time passed, but it stopped quickly. עליה להמתין 6 עונות קודם שתתחיל בספירת 7 נקיים. She has to wait 3 onot. Now, an ona is really a half a day. I'm sorry, 6 onot. An ona is really half a day. So 6 onot technically translates into 3 full days. Okay? Kol ona hi o yom o laila. ובסך הכל 3 ימים שלמים מעת לעת, וזאת בכדי שלא תפלוט שכבת זרע בתוך ימי 7 נקיים. This is to guarantee that she won't have any zera, any semen in her during the 7 נקיים. שכאשר ממתינה אחר התשמיש במשך 6 עונות, when she waits this amount of time, אפילו אם נשאר בה מעט שכבת זרע, הרי הוא מסריח. Whatever is left over is already rotted or gone, okay? ולפי חשבון זה יוצא שאישה ששימשה עם בעלה במוצאי שבת, ולאחר מכן ראתה דם, הרי 6 עונות שלמות מעת לעת מזמן שימושה מסתיימות באמצע ליל רביעי. This line is what explains to us why, even though we're saying it's 6 onot and it's 3 days, why, according to Chacham Ovadia, the halacha is to wait 4 days. Because if she had relations on a Saturday night and she waits 6 full onot, Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, so now Tuesday night is the end of the 6 onot, but she can't do anything till Wednesday during the day, right? Or before sunset. She can't do her hefsek b'tahara until Wednesday. So that translates into what we would call 4 minimum bleeding days. Does everybody understand that? Anybody have questions? Okay, and then אבל האשכנזים נוהגים להחמיר להמתין יום אחד נוסף, ויש שמחמירות להמתין עד 6 ו7 ימים. So now he says that the Ashkenazim hold 5 minimum bleeding days, and there are even other customs of 6 or 7, and he encourages that you should do the hefsek b'tahara as soon as you can. Now, this is a big difference with how I teach brides. I teach brides 4. Okay, I will, as long as they don't bleed more than 4 days, I will tell them that they're most likely going to hear that the minimum days is 5, but I make it very, very clear that the halacha is 4. Okay. Now, here we have, this is similar to what we just saw. Okay. No, this is exactly what we just saw. Sorry. Okay. Now, here we have a stronger leniency. I'm reading the bold. אבל אם לא שימשה עם בעלה בתוך 4 ימים הסמוכים לזמן שראתה דם, למנהג הספרדים בעדות המזרח אינה צריכה להמתין כלל. So because we're establishing that the reason for the minimum bleeding days is based on shechvat zera, If there's no zera because they didn't have relations, then there's no minimum bleeding days. So if the couple did not have relations the 4 days prior to when she first saw blood, then there's no minimum bleeding days. If she only bleeds 1 day, that's her 1 day bleeding, and she can do the hefsek b'tahara right there. Okay, so keep in mind that the minimum bleeding days is dependent on when the couple last had relations. This is something that's a little more complicated to teach most brides. Okay, I've definitely taught some, but it's worth mentioning, even if you don't go through the whole logic of it. And in the script at the end where he says Minhag Ashkenazim is to wait the 5 days even if they didn't have relations, and he puts even va'afilu im lo haya ba'ala ba'ir ya'amim rabim, like even if they were physically apart, he was out of the city, and we know that there was no possibility of them having relations, still Ashkenazim are going to be mahmir. Question? Yes.
Is that what you mean when you said that? So if they were not together for 4 days before and she bleeds, let's say for 1 day, why would we not consider that spotting?
No,
Unless you're saying that.
It's not that you don't consider it spotting. It's that there's no minimum bleeding days. She can do the hefsek b'tahara that 1 day. Oh, you're saying why is it not spotting? Why is she nida from that 1 day?
Yeah, like why is she going into
So
nida?
here-
That's
here, whatever we're talking about here, we're assuming that the bleeding was a nida cause, was something that
Okay.
was defined as nida.
So you're
Okay.
saying as soon as the bleeding ends,
As
she could do
soon
her
as-
hefsek.
Correct. Even
Doesn't
if-
matter if it's been 3 days. or 2
Correct.
days.
Exactly. Exactly.
you.
Meaning it has to be, we usually say it has to be 4 days from when she started to bleed, but here we're saying, no, it has to be 4 days from when she last had relations. And again, it's provided she's not bleeding anymore. If she's still bleeding, obviously she has to wait longer. Okay. Now here he puts in something also really, really interesting. Okay, I'm not gonna read it around to you. I'm just gonna tell it to you. If a woman was taught the halacha as 5 bleeding days, minimum bleeding days, and she never knew that there was such a thing as 4, okay? Then, according to Chacham Ovadia, when she learns that the strict letter of the law is 4 bleeding days, she does not have to do Hatarat Nedarim in order to rely on the 4. Even if she was married many, many years and she always practiced minimum 5, even if her periods didn't last 5 days, the point here is if she didn't consciously accept the Chumrah, then she doesn't have to do Hatarat Nedarim. If she knew that that the halacha said 4, and she chose the Chumrah and chose to keep 5, then she would be required to do Hatarat Nedarim. So here is another, I don't know if you were taught this at all, okay? Rachel or Rachel, Zucker, you mentioned spotting, right? So when a woman has spotting or staining, we have to determine, is it nida or is it not nida? But oftentimes when a woman has a stain and it renders her nida, oftentimes that's only going to last for 1 day. Often, not always, but often, if it's not a flow, right? So here, again, Hamabaja distinguishes between a ketem shelo b'hargasha versus what we would call a mar'eh. A mar'eh is a stain or blood that a woman sees with hargasha, not necessarily her period, but with hargasha. And here, a ketem tameh without hargasha. He says that if that's the case, ketamim are derabanan, and therefore a woman can wait the minimum of 1 bleeding day. That means right when she finishes bleeding, she can do her hefsek b'tahara. Now, I want to just give one very important postscript here, and that is that, well, in this case, okay, and that is that if a woman had relations within the last 4 days. And she's relying on this ketem shelo b'hargasha and doing a hefsek before the 4th day. She needs to make sure to clean herself out well. The recommendation is she sit in a warm bath in order to be polet all the zera, right? In order that the semen will all be removed before she does the hefsek b'tara. Okay, so this is, I skipped that slide, so that's why I'm putting that in over here. Okay.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Why is she doing a hefsek if she's just having tamim? Like, why is she gonna do 7 clean days? And
Okay, so what we're again, anything I'm talking about here is she's nida, right? So most of the time a woman becomes nida from her period, but sometimes a woman can have a problematic stain and that will render her nida. Yes? Right? So that's what we're talking about here. So when she has her period, chances are her flow is going to be, average woman is 4 or 5 days. It's not usually less than 4, but there are some women who have much shorter cycles and maybe their period only lasts 2 or 3 days, right? So then we can apply this rule of you don't have to wait a minimum of, you have to wait only a minimum of 4 from when you last had relations. But if we're talking about a stain, we're talking about a mid-cycle staining. We're not talking about a period. We're talking about a ketem that makes you tameh, right? And it's without hargasha. Then you can just wait until the bleeding stops, which often is 1 bleeding day, and do the hefsek right away. But if you do that again, and here I put the PowerPoint right there, she has to make sure to clean herself out well. She should use warm water for that. And I want to just read that last paragraph because this is something that is important for Kallah to know. V'yesh l'smoch al zeh b'Kallah shera'ata dam betulim. When a Kallah sees hymenal bleeding, which is not a period and it's not a ketem, it's something else, right? We do hold that she's nida, but depending on how she scheduled her wedding or depending on when they consummated the marriage, if waiting the minimum 4 bleeding days and then counting 7 clean days is not going to allow her to get to the mikvah before her next period, then in that case, we're going to let her wait just that 1 bleeding day for dam batulim. She's going to take a bath, clean herself out, and do the hefsek b'tahara that same day, right? That same day that if she had relations at night, the next day before sunset. The idea is that the last 4 words, we don't want her to be forbidden to her husband for a very prolonged time. And in particular, it seems to be with newlyweds, like we're a little more concerned about maybe about their relationship, maybe about them being careful with the halacha, whatever it might be. But again, because it's not midat oraita, okay, because it's a derabanan, we're going to allow waiting even less than the 4.
Ask a question.
Sure.
So why wouldn't everyone just wait the 1 day for hymenal bleeding?
So again, I teach all my brides too. However, today, because most girls go on the pill, most women go on the pill, very often it's recommended to schedule their period to come within a few days after the wedding, right? So they have 1, 2, 3 days to consummate the wedding, and then they get their period, right away. So even waiting 1 day plus the 7 is not going to help. But I think any woman who has their wedding scheduled in a way, the way we used to do it, before everybody went on the pill, was to schedule smack in the middle, a full 2 weeks after your period began, and then a full 2 weeks before your next period. If your wedding is scheduled that way, then this leniency applies, right? Because if you're 2 weeks before your next period, or close to 2 weeks before your next period, if you wait 4 or 5 bleeding days plus 7, you may not get to the mikvah before your next period. Versus if you wait 1 and 7, you'll have a few days together before your next period comes. Does that make sense? Any questions? Okay, so we're going to go on to the next halacha, or the next topic. Okay, Dam Mechamat Hashmish. Dam Mechamat Hashmish is really like a concept or a condition that a woman might have. And literally it means that a woman bleeds every time she has tashmish, every time she has relations. Now, obviously, if that happens, that can be a problem for the couple. And technically, they wouldn't be able to be married or stay married because they wouldn't be able to have relations if they know that it's going to cause her to bleed. So in order to, it's not a common issue, okay? And in order to solve it from a halachic perspective, what's recommended is that after a couple consummates the marriage, after a woman finishes with dam betulim, hymenal bleeding, the next 3 times that the couple has relations, both of them should check themselves before and after tashmish, okay, to make sure that there's no blood coming after they have relations. Once they do this 3 times, they establish a chazakah, and they sort of establish for themselves that they don't have to worry about this condition. What happens later on, if it happens once, it's not going to be a big deal. If it happens often, you're going to have to consult with a rabbi to see what to do. But we're not going to label it dam mechamat tashmish if they established early in the marriage that they don't have that issue. Okay. So the next topic has to do with ketamim. It's possible this is not so different than some of the things that you've heard. I don't know, you'll enlighten me and let me know what is different. I feel like over the years, more of these things are being taught or at least mentioned. But when it comes to ketamim, when it comes to really any time you have your bleeding without hargasha, okay, the halacha is that ketamim is, oh, well, actually, I'm sorry. Let me take that back. Don't take that intro that I just said. Ketamim staining. Anytime a woman stains, you're going to have certain criteria that are going to make the stain or could make the stain problematic. One of them is what you see the stain on. And usually we say that the stain needs to be on a white natural material. So what we have over here, and again, I'm reading the bold, lo gazru al bigdei sivonim, that when it comes to ketamim, our chachamim did not only said the problem is not on colored garments. And according to Chacham Ovadia, colored garments is anything except white. Even off-white, a pale yellow, a beige. When a woman sees a stain on those things, she can totally ignore it. Now, sometimes if that happens on her underwear, it might leak through and go onto her thigh. That can't be ignored. But on the colored garment itself, whether it's a towel, an underwear, a piece of clothing, it's colored, she can completely ignore it. Okay. The second paragraph talks about niyar. Niyar is paper, which includes toilet paper and tissue. If a woman sees a stain, even if it's on white toilet paper and tissue, she can completely ignore it. And in the third paragraph, we talk about nylon. Nylon or any type of synthetic fibers. So obviously if it's a garment that's made out of a synthetic material, but in most cases, panty liners have some sort of synthetic, either nylon, plastic, something that puts it into the category of eno mekabel tum'ah, something that we can ignore when we see a stain. And again, we're talking about a ketem, a stain without hargasha. Any questions? So now he takes it a step further and says that if there is a woman that has staining problems, not period, but stains, okay, she stains often mid-cycle, יכולה ללבוש בגדי צבעוניים ב7 נקיים. she can wear colored undergarments during her 7 clean days. I would say when I teach this to brides, if a bride doesn't have a staining issue, it's not so difficult to wear white undergarments. But I will emphasize to them as they get older or later on, if they do encounter staining issues, or any woman who, on day 4 or day 5 of her Shivanakim has a problematic stain where she really has to start counting her 7 clean days over, she should keep this in mind for the future. And again, the rationale is that that the couple shouldn't have an extra prolonged period of time where she is nida.
What's the question, please? Yeah. Is it permissible to wear panty liners on the white garments if she doesn't have an issue with staining?
Yeah, yes. Even if she doesn't have an issue of staining, yeah, the answer is yes. Yeah, not a problem. Okay, and again, it would stem a little bit from this, but also for hygiene reasons, it's fine. Okay. The next one. Okay. So now the other halacha during the Shivanakim is again, lachat achila, ideally that a woman should do 2 bidikot every day, 1 in the morning and 1 closer to sunset. Now that is lachat achila, that is ideally what should be done. But b'diavad, we really, really have to remind our brides that if they forgot, they couldn't. I once had someone ask me the question of, I work in the city in Manhattan and I'm commuting back to Brooklyn, and she commutes back in the in the winter short days. Her commute back is somewhere between 4 and 5 at night, and that's really the time of when you would do that second bidika closer to sunset, and she was asking me, should I stay and work an hour later so I can do the bidika, within an hour or so of sunset, and then come home later on the train? And my answer was no, like, it's fine. You're going to miss 1 check on that, on each day, and that's fine. But this, I don't know how it's written here, but okay, so I'll read here. The b'diavad, afilu im lo badka b'kol yom, ela rak pa'am achat b'tchilat hashiv'a, day 1, u pa'am achat b'sofam, day 7. Okay. Alu b'diavad spirat shiv'a nakim v'titbol v'tohora leba'ala. So the b'diavad, the bottom line is that in order for a woman to go to the mikveh, she needs a hefsek b'tahara, 1 check on day 1 and 1 check on day 7. Now, we never really recommend that because it can get very complicated if you miss one of those checks, and you're going to have to, delay going to the mikveh. But again, it's important for women to realize that as diligent as we want them to be, especially early in their marriage with making bidikot every day and twice a day, they shouldn't mistakenly think that if they miss 1 day, they have to start counting 7 days again. Any questions?
Yeah. Is there anything in a situation where a woman wants to do 2 a day but can't do the second one in the afternoon, so you're going to do 1 in the morning, is there anything to like doing it later in the, like, you're not doing it close to sunset, but you're not going to do it first thing in the morning? Is there anything like a lunchtime badika? I don't know, a sort of criteria like that?
So again, right. So ideally, it should be 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, because you want the full day. Again, it doesn't have to be a sunrise and sunset, but you want that full day. Well, what I would tell women is if you forgot a morning one, there's no reason to do 2 later on in the day. You forgot the morning one, it's okay. You do 1 later in the day, it's fine. And what you're saying about doing it midday, so if you forgot the morning one and you want to do it midday because you're afraid you're going to forget the later one, that's okay also. I feel like, especially at the beginning, women have to do whatever they can do to get into the habit and the pattern of making, the bidikot, and ideally the maximum amount of bidikot. but not to be so wound up and uptight about it. Again, most importantly, that they understand that they can continue counting their 7 clean days unless they miss both checks on day number 1, right? Or both checks on day number 7, they might not be able to go to the mikveh that night. But all the other days, you miss 1, it's for sure not a problem. Even if you miss 2 on the other days, not a problem at all. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next topic, and that is a yoledet. So this is something I do teach. I don't expect that my brides are all gonna remember it, but I do every now and then get a woman after she gives birth asking me, wait, what was it that you said? So try to follow along with me. This is based on really what's written in Parashat Tazria. In Parashat Tazria, it says that if a woman gives birth to a boy, she's Tame'ah for 7 days. And then it qualifies the next 33 days as Yemei Tahar. So, and again, this is what they did in the time of the Beit HaMikdash. After 7 days, the woman would bring a korban, she would become Tahara, and then the next 33 days, whatever dam she sees would be considered dam tahar. If she gives birth to a girl, then everything's doubled. She's for 14 days tame'ah, and then for the next 66 days or up till 80 days of giving birth is dam tahar. Now, we don't practice this way. The way we practice is whatever, if she sees blood, she's going to continue to be, if she sees problematic blood, she's going to continue to be nidah. But what Chacham Ovadia does is he explains that the first time a woman goes to the mikveh after she gives birth is the oraita. She gave birth, she saw blood, right? She finishes bleeding, she counts her 7 clean days, she goes to the mikveh, she obligated from the Torah to do that. However, if she's going to the mikveh for the second time within 40 days of giving birth to a boy, or within 80 days of giving birth to a girl, okay, she still has to go to the mikveh. That's how we practice. It's not a question, but it's a question of, is it really commanded? And therefore, Chacham Ovadia says she's going to go to the mikveh, but she's not going to make the beracha. Lo tevarech al tzvila. She's not going to make the beracha when she goes to the mikveh. Again, we're talking about the second time of giving birth to a boy, if it's within 40 days of giving birth, or more common would be the second time of going to the mikveh within 80 days of giving birth to a girl. Okay, so again, it's not affecting the halacha of is she nidah or does she have to go to the mikveh? Mikveh, again, she has to go that second time, but she shouldn't make the beracha. And this is something that Chacham Ovadia was very, very, very careful with, what we call safek berachot lahakel. If there's any safek, if there's any question whether you're required to make the beracha or not, lahakel, you're lenient, and you're not going to say Hashem's name for no reason. Okay.
Question to clarify. So this is beyond the time. This is like she's already gone to the mikveh after giving birth, let's say a month or a month and a half after giving birth.
Correct.
And this is an additional time. This is like she has to go again.
Time. And again, that additional time needs to be within 40 days of giving birth to the boy or within 80 days of giving birth to the girl. So again, the boy is less common. It's much less common that a woman's going to go for the second time within 40 days.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so here we're going to talk about one of the harchakot. The harchakot are the distances, usually physical distances, but there's a lot of behaviors and practices between a husband and wife that we say they should not do, when she is nidah. And the one in particular we're going to discuss is making the bed, fixing the bed. Again, I'm not sure where you're up to and what you learned, but sure at some point you've learned that a woman should not make the bed in front of her husband when she is nida. Chacham has a very interesting way of defining what the Chachamim meant by Hatza'at Mitah. So I'm going to read to you here. Asur li'isha nida lahatzia mitato shel ba'ala befanav. It's forbidden for a woman who's nida to prepare the bed or fix the bed of her husband in his presence. Shehem derechiba, because these types of actions are a intimate or loving type of action. Okay, but now he explains, Isur hatza'at hamita befanav eno ela kishematia hamita lishkav aleha. When we talk about hatza'at mita, it means preparing the bed to sleep in it. But when you wake up from your sleep, like in the morning, it's okay for her to fix the bed and close the covers and tuck in the sheets. Okay, so that the house should be neat and clean and nice looking. So the distinction he makes here is what we think of making the bed, which is fixing the bed in the morning, tucking in the sheets, closing the covers. That's not derechiba. That's a chore. That's making the house neat. But turning down the bed, right? Opening up the comforter, unfolding the sheet or opening it up is much more of an inviting and what we would call derechiba type of gesture. So just an interesting distinction that he makes that not everybody is aware of. Any questions? So we're going to move on to our next topic, which is chatzitza. And the two things in particular we're going to be talking about are nail polish and nail length. Again, this is something that I think the practice has become way more lenient than what even Chacham Ovadia intended. It's very, very interesting to have experienced this in the 90s and 2000s and 2010s and still have people who will ask, well, you know, does this mikveh allow nail polish or not, right? Long nails or nail polish. So in the 90s, or he might have written it earlier, but when I was first introduced to this in the 90s, I would teach this halakha to my brides and I would tell them, but there's no mikveh that's going to allow nail polish. So I'll give you an idea of what he says, and I'll also try and give you the dynamic of, you know, how things changed over the years. Okay. Okay. So what's very interesting is that he begins by saying that the minhag of Benot Yisrael is litol tzipornaim. The minhag of Benot Yisrael is to keep their nail length short or flush with the tips of their finger, right? You know, and the issue of growing your nails a little bit longer when it comes to mikveh is really just whatever dirt or residue might get stuck underneath the nail bed. And people who keep a longer nails are very familiar with that, okay? But he starts by saying that minhag is to cut the nails, okay? Then he goes on to say that, I'm going to say this in English, women who grow their nails for beauty purposes and polish them or paint them, it's a mitzvah to teach them and to explain to them the importance of not deviating from the minhag. And every man should warn or teach his wife about this, and she should cut her nails and also remove the nail polish. Okay. Now, when he was presented with this issue, the real question was, if women are going to be told that they have to cut their nails and they have to remove their nail polish, there are women who are not going to go to the mikveh. And therefore, he said, if there are women who refuse to cut their nails or to remove their nail polish, and here he's talking to the balaniyot, right, to the woman in the mikvaot, yesh laha'alim ayin mehem, just ignore them. don't inspect and look too carefully, ignore it, and don't prevent them from going to the mikveh. And really what his concern here is we're talking about a minhag, an important minhag, but if we're going to be so strict with it, we're going to end up with women who aren't going to the mikveh. And I'm telling you, practically, there were women who weren't going to the mikveh, but telling their husbands that they did go. And the reason they didn't go is because they were uncomfortable when the balaniyot would tell them you have to file your nails more. And therefore, we just have to make sure that they clean under the nail bed properly. That's if their nails are long. And if they have nail polish, I'm reading the last line of the in the bold. I'm sorry, I'll say it and then I'll read the last line. If they're wearing nail polish, they have to make sure that it's completely filled in polish without any cracks or chips. Because if the polish is not complete, if it has any chips in it, then it's what we call chatzitza. Then it is a barrier and prevents the water from enveloping the whole woman. So if she has a full set of polish, that's how she likes it to be. That's how she goes out in public. Then when she goes to the mikveh, all the water envelops her as one. But if she has chips in the nail polish, especially if she's wearing a darker color or they're noticeable types of chips, it is definitely considered chatzitza, and she can't be tovel in the mikveh that way. Any questions?
Even if it's regular nail polish and not gel?
Even, yes, this was before gel existed. Yes, this was written well before gel existed. Again, with gel, you have a better, I don't want to say guarantee, but you have a better chance that it won't be chipped. When I taught this halacha again in the 90s, I wanted women just to understand that a complete nail polish was not chatzitza, because this halacha, by the way, applies for netilat yadayim also. When you do netilat yadayim, if you have really bad chips in your nails, it's problematic. How we define it exactly, sometimes we'll say, well, it's only if it's really noticeable or really something that you'd be embarrassed to go out in public with. There's questions, but I wanted women to understand that halachically a fresh coat of polish without chips is not chatzitza. But then I would say, but there's no mikveh that's really going to allow you. There was one Sephardic mikveh in New Jersey that sort of allowed. They definitely didn't make it easy, but they would allow in extenuating circumstances. What became today, it evolved into, and I think with the gel, the reason many people are more lenient with gel. Who asked the gel question? I don't know who asked it.
Rachel.
No, I'm just
Rachel.
Oh, Rachel, you said that. So I'm curious, why'd you assume only gel? Were you taught that?
Yeah, I just was taught that it had to be gel.
You were taught that it had to be gel for any reason, any given reason?
Because gel is like more permanent.
Right.
So it's like a part of you.
Right.
And it had to be fresh gel. It couldn't be grown out at all. It had to be like
even fresh gel, right? It had to be the way you like it to be, like the way you groom yourself. And
yeah, but it had to be like it couldn't like be grown out at the top. You know what I mean? Like there couldn't be a space of your nail that didn't have gel, and it had to be the full
bottom
nail.
of the nail. Yes, at the bottom.
Yeah.
Right. So again, Chamovadia wouldn't necessarily. I think the space maybe. It's hard. I think for the most part, people who rely on this Kallah, again, if it's a complete coat of polish, and especially when you do gel, and this is how you leave your nails all the time, right? So that's why you'll see many communities relying on this again. And this is something that really I saw with my own eyes change in the last 10, 20, 30 years. It's very interesting, just very interesting. Let me go on. Okay. So this is Tarat Habayit is Chacham Ovadia's, magnus opus on Tarat Mishpacha. It's a big 3-volume set. I thought it was interesting to see the difference in how he words it versus the previous source was one of his sons, was Chacham David Yosef. Look how he puts over here, let them dip, you know, if they want to grow their nails or they want to put polish, let them go. Me'achar shemin hadin in probably shum chashash chatzitza, because from the letter of the law, we're not worried that it's chatzitza because it's complete. ורק לאחר תפילתן טוב להוכיחם בדרכי נועם ובמתינות שיחזירו לנהוג כמנהג בנות ישראל. And then afterwards, you can try and let them know. The language is a little bit different. We're like, Chacham David was really like, we should teach them from the beginning. The husband should tell them, everyone should tell them. Here it's written in a little bit more of a gentle way. But again, I want you to realize that when this question was presented, there were women who were leaving the house, telling their husbands they were going to the mikveh. They would not go to the mikveh because the balaniot would give them a hard time with their nails or with whatever else. They just come home and tell their husbands that they went to the mikveh, and really, really, really halachically problematic. So it needed to be addressed. All right. There's another thing related to chatzitza that Chacham Ovadia is pretty felt pretty strongly about, and that's hair conditioner. Now again, nowadays you will find more mikvaot have hair conditioner available if a woman needs, but many don't. And what he says is that when a woman uses conditioner, number one, she rinses it off, and that whatever is left is not mamashut. It's not really something like tangible. It's not like a heavy layer. It's not like a heavy leave-in conditioner cream or oil that you put in your hair and you see the real shine, you know, and you can wipe through it and you'll see that shine on your fingers, okay? But then he goes on to say, not only that, but if a woman needs it, and here I'm reading the last line in bold, v'adraba, מרכך שיער מביא לידי כך שלאחר מכן יכולה לסרוק שערותיה בנקל. Knots in hair are chatzitza. So if a woman needs the conditioner in order to comb out her hair and guarantee not to have any knots, then according to him, she should use the conditioner. And again, we're talking about a conditioner that you rinse out, not any type of leave-in conditioner. Just as a side point, which is a little bit interesting, I work at pools in the summer, and at one point I had to become a certified pool operator. And one of the first things I learned is that when pools get very cloudy and murky, it's very rarely because of dirt. It's almost always because of creams and suntan lotion and things like that that people have on their body that are very heavy oil that affect the pH in the water and make it much more difficult to balance the water. And then there's a need to add more chlorine, and you'll have that stronger chlorine smell. So I did speak in New York. I spoke to one or two people who worked at mikvaot where they didn't outright admit it, but for the most part, there are mikvaot that will agree that you can use conditioner or should use conditioner if you need it to get out knots, but they still might not have conditioner available because they don't want every woman to put conditioner on, even if they rinse it off right before they go into the mikveh, because again, it can cause problems with the pH. Just an interesting piece of information. Okay, so this is the last topic we have, and this is related to Friday night Tevilah. Okay, so I'm gonna say two things. One is related to, I'm sorry, it's not, they're both related to Tevilah in hot water or in warm water, heated water. One topic we're going to talk about is where do you say the baracha? And the other one is Tevilah on Friday nights. And the reason we have this discussion is because, again, I'm reading the bold, Din hamikvaot kedin bet hamerchatz. once we heat the water, the status of the mikveh has the same status of a bet merchatz, of a bathhouse. And we know that you're not allowed to say a bracha in a bathhouse, in a place where people bathe, okay? And therefore, according to Chacham Ovadia, a woman should not say the bracha in the mikveh itself, or in the mikveh room itself. She should be just outside or in an adjacent room. In addition to that, we always say a beracha before we perform the mitzvah. And again, this is something that Chacham Ovadia was extremely, extremely careful about. When I light Shabbat candles, I say the beracha and then I light the candles. Because if I light the candles first, I fulfilled the mitzvah of lighting the candles. But now that the mitzvah is complete, I lost the opportunity to say the beracha. The beracha has to be what we call over la'asiyatan, said beforehand. So when it comes to the heated mikveh, because it has a status of a bet merchatz, a woman should not say the beracha inside. She should say it outside. She should also be be'odah levusha b'chalukah. She should be covered either in a robe or at least properly wrapped in a towel. She should also have something on her head, because anytime married women say bracha, they should have their head covered. And then she can go into the mikveh. I personally have experienced many times balaniyot who, despite the fact that I said the bracha, and now I'm going down into the mikveh, they'll start asking me questions as I'm going down into the mikveh. Like, oh, did you take off your contact lenses? And I can't answer, because you can't talk from when you say the bracha until you immerse. And I'll just like look up and, go like this or shake my head. But it's a little frustrating, because I know if I'm experiencing that, I know it's very, very different for kalot to not interrupt, right? And to not speak. Okay. So the last halacha that has to do with the hot water, and I'm not going to go into all the details because we only have a couple of minutes left, but there's a gezerah that on Shabbat, we're not supposed to immerse in hot water, even if it's preheated. We can use that water to clean panav, yadav, and raglav, but we can't wash our whole body in water that was heated, even if it was heated before Shabbat. Now, Chacham Ovadia agrees that if a woman is in an area where there are only Ashkenaz mikvaot and they only open later than Seta Kochavim, which oftentimes is the case, he'll say you're not going to delay going to the mikvah, right? The mitzvah of immersing supersedes the gezerah of immersing in hot water. But what he does say is that it's best for a woman to immerse ben hashmashot, that means between sunset and Seta Kochavim. Here he actually says the shlosh esrei v'chetzi dakot la'achar shkia, within 13 and a half minutes of shkia. And again, this just has to do with it's safek yom shishi, it's safek Shabbat, and we can be a little more quote unquote lean during those first 13 and a half minutes. So ideally, when a woman goes to the mikvah on a Friday night, she should go within the 13 and a half minutes of shkia and not later. Okay, but again, if she needs to go later, she can. Any questions? No?
Why is that only for Sfardim and not Ashkenazim? The Ben Hashmashot situation. Like, what's the reason that Ashkenazim can?
My understanding, from my understanding, the Ashkenazim are machmir and only allow immersion after Seta Kochavim. Now, if there's a shat dachak, if there's a real reason why a woman might need to immerse earlier, even Ashkenazim might let the woman immerse at sunset. Should there be a difference? I'm not so sure that there should be. But again, the idea is if we can minimize the quote unquote violation of immersing in hot water on Shabbat, and again, the minimize is just because in that first 13 and a half minutes, we can be a little more lenient. We can't violate Shabbat, but we can do things a little bit, you're allowed to do what's called Amira Lagoy. You can ask an Andrew to do something for you within those 13.5 minutes. So similarly here, he's saying within those 13.5 minutes, you can do Tevilah in hot water. But again, B'diavad, he says you can do Tevilah in hot water even later. He's not going to tell you to delay immersion and go the next night. Any other thoughts, questions, topics that you might be interested in?
Sephardi, like, this is more of a general question about Sephardim. Do most Sephardim follow Rav Avadia Yosef, or is this like half, or?
Unfortunately, I would say no. When I say unfortunately, the quick answer to that is, no, but there are many that do. I'll tell you, in Brooklyn, I got married 1990. In the 90s, even 2000s, there were very few Sephardic mikvaot that would accommodate Tevilah at sunset on a Friday night. Very few Sephardic ones. Now it's changed. It's changed where they're a little more understanding or tolerant or able to, or wanting to accommodate the range, but it's still not being taught. It's not being taught as much. Again, with something like the 4 bleeding days and the 7, 4 plus 7, I think that's very, very important to teach because it really can affect the relationship with the couple, and it's halacha versus minhag. With something like Tevilah at sunset on a Friday night, I don't want to say it's not important. It's a little frustrating when you want to be more meticulous and in that case be a little stricter and more careful. But if women are dipping later, it's okay. I find it fascinating that when it comes to the nail polish, how that's spread like wildfire amongst Ashkenazim. Like that to me was like, so again, interesting to experience it and see it develop over the years.
I'm asking more with regards to if we're teaching a Sephardi Kallah, is it likely that this psak will be relevant in most cases, or are we going to have a lot of cases where we're going to it's going to be a different
So
practice?
There's 2 things I like to do as a Kallah teacher. The first thing I do is when a Kallah is coming to me, I want to know who the Chatan is learning with, or at the very least, who's the Rav who's marrying them. I'll make very clear. I was one of those Kallah teachers that I didn't need to teach dozens of Kallah. If someone's coming to me, they're coming to me because they know I teach Chacham Ovadia or because we have a relationship. And there were very few Kalot that I would teach knowing that they didn't want to know what Chacham Ovadia, right? That they were going to follow something else and I'd have to do more homework and, accommodate them. So I think the first thing I would say, it's very, very important that you're on the same page with whoever's teaching the Chatan. Because if you're going to be teaching this and he's going to be teaching something else, then it's going to be problematic. The second thing, though, that's important to keep in mind is if you're teaching any person, some of these things are important to say just because if a woman has a challenge in her marriage, something happens, a woman starts staining mid-cycle every month, and she's doing 4 and 7, or even 5 and 7, right? Or even 4 and 7, it doesn't matter. And she has no clue that if I would ask a Rav, maybe there's a possibility that I can just do 1 and 7. Not that she's going to do it on her own, but to know that there's this possibility and to encourage her to ask so that things don't get extra complicated. And again, I can't make any, I don't want to make any blanket statements, but couples who are going through fertility issues, there's a good chance that even some Ashkenaz rabbis might rely on some of the things that Chacham Ovadia says, again, specifically with the 1 and 7 or the 4 and 7. That's by far the biggest, what we would call leniency, right? The biggest difference. There are reasons to rely on it. Same thing with the nail polish, right? So we're not going to say, oh, you should totally wear nail polish. but someone who needs to rely on it should know that she can rely on it. That's I think the most important part.
Thank you.
All right, I don't want to keep you too late. Thank you so much. I didn't put my, who are you in touch with from Eden Center? Who's like your main contact?
Judith?
Hmm?
Judith?
Judith? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do my best to make sure that Judith gets a copy of the PowerPoint and my WhatsApp number or email, so that if you ever have any needs in the future, you're more than welcome. Thank
you.
you. Good night. Almost.